Meet Takemichi Yoshito, the absolute laughingstock of the challenger world. Nobody gave this underdog a second glance, and veteran fighters ruthlessly mocked his pathetic weakness. Why? Because even the most basic skirmish, with a low-level mob, ended with him face down in the dirt, utterly defeated. His miserable journey kicked off the moment the mysterious magic towers violently pierced. Step inside and boom, you're a challenger. You're thrust into a brutal, game-like reality, swarming with monstrous bosses, hidden treasures, and mountains of epic loot. While other kids enjoyed their youth, our guy busted his back working endless after school. He scraped and clawed to escape the crushing grip of poverty, desperate to finally make a name for himself as a top-tier challenger. Drowning in debt, he took a massive gamble on a mysterious skill stone from a sketchy black market dealer. It supposedly held a god-tier ability, infinite revival within the tower. But there was a brutal catch. Every single time he died, his combat stats tanked. A few pathetic deaths later, his attributes didn't just hit zero, they plummeted deep into the negatives. He literally became more fragile than a squashed rat. Fast forward to another horribly botched attempt to clear just a single level. Our boy woke up gasping on the tower's brutal first floor. But right there, gleaming in the shadowy distance, lay a literal golden ticket, a flawless skill stone. His eyes widened. Snag that beauty, and he could wipe his crushing debts clean forever. He eagerly took one step forward, and bam! An instant kill trap shredded him. He got butchered by those traps, time and time again. Brutalized, but refusing to quit after dozens of agonizing deaths, he finally dragged his bloody body to the stone, tasting sweet. But his tank was completely empty. His vision faded to black, and right as he passed out, the magical stone triggered on its own. A robotic voice chimed in. Skill inversion acquired. He gasped, his eyes snapping open as a shocking surge of raw power flooded his previously hollow bones. Yanking open his status window, his jaw hit the floor. His hopelessly trashed stats were suddenly off the charts. And right then, another glowing holographic prompt materialized directly in his face. The tower officially registered his new ability, and the terrifying truth stared back at him. Inversion completely flipped every single status effect, meaning all buffs, nasty debuffs, and weird abnormal conditions functioned perfectly. Takemichi's breath hitched as reality set in. Those crippling penalties from his infinite revival, they just violently mutated into permanent godlike power-ups. His mind raced, wondering what insane stroke of luck handed him this flawless counter-skill at the absolute perfect second. He glanced back at the shattered glowing container, and the puzzle clicked. That ultra-rare gemstone waiting in the death corridor was the catalyst for this miracle. His body had instinctively absorbed the item when he was hovering too close to the Grim Reaper to even make a choice. For a split second, his heart ached over the massive mountain of cash he just lost by not selling the artifact. But that fleeting greed evaporated the moment he realized the monstrous synergy between his two abilities. If inversion constantly flipped his revival penalties, then dying no longer made him weaker. Every brutal death would forge him into an unstoppable juggernaut. A burning golden path to the tower's peak ignited in his mind. Clenching his fists, he vowed that come hell or high water, he was going to conquer the top horde, endless wealth, and force the world to scream his name. His desperate ambition forged into a lethal vow he would become the absolute strongest challenger alive, no matter the bloody price. Yet even as his grand dream took flight, reality crashed back down, forcing him to brace for the immediate nightmare ahead. Shaking off the fantasies of glory, he locked his eyes onto the hyper-lethal problems staring him in the face. Glaring down the gore-soaked corridor, the grim truth hit him. Crawling out of here alive meant sprint. He watched the instant kill mechanism menacingly click back into place, fully aware it would slice him to ribbons the second he stepped forward. A sickening dread washed over him. As he faced the absolute, he might have to get shredded by these blades over and over again to escape. Pure horror gripped his chest, his mind frantically screaming, "No way!" But the phantom pain of his past deaths flared up, reminding him that resurrecting didn't numb a single ounce of the excruciating agony. The searing, mind-melting pain of getting slaughtered was just as horrific the 50th time as it was the first. What was worse, dying repeatedly in rapid succession threatened to completely shatter his psyche. He knew deep down that if he abused this loop too much, his sanity would He violently tightened his fists, forcing the surging panic back down his throat. Then a bold, crazy thought sliced through the terror. His tense muscles slowly relaxed, as cold hard logic took the wheel. Thanks to that sweet inversion skill, his base attributes had already skyrocketed to roughly double their original strength. A spark of insane hope ignited. What if his body was tough enough to just brutally tank the traps? Taking a deep breath, he fully committed to testing. Scanning the bloody stone walls for literally any safer detour, he searched for an out. Finding nothing but cold dead ends, he realized there was only one violently reckless option left. Brute forcing his way, he kicked off the ground, launching himself at breakneck speed straight into the kill zone. The air around him instantly hummed with lethal energy as the nightmare trap violently awakened. A literal hurricane of razor-sharp steel erupted from the shadows, tearing toward him, but he furiously charged straight into the sprinting desperately to outpace the relentless storm. A singular strike catches his eye, but his reaction falls a split second short of a clean dodge. The hallway instantly transforms into a suffocating Iron Maiden of yet he plows right through the meat grinder. He crashes down into a fresh nightmare of thrusting pikes and wicked slashes, absolutely refusing to freeze up in the heart of the slaughter. Then a switch flips in his mind. The once invisible death snares snap into crystal clear focus. Lethal tripwires materialize before his eyes, glowing like jagged neon lightning suspended in thin air. Without a second thought, he shifts into overdrive. He explodes into a literal blur, threading the needle through the deadly crossfire. A colossal shadow plummets from the ceiling, demanding a split-second pivot. Calculating the sluggish drop rate, he violently contorts his torso just before impact. The devastating blow whiffs entirely, letting him slide right past the shockwave by a hair's breadth. Every incoming death trap is now just His breakneck pace rockets him across the vast hall, leaving a trail of deafening blasts and shattered stone in his wake. Suddenly, a hulking gargoyle with blazing eyes shatters the floorboards, completely cutting off his escape route. Unfazed by the massive roadblock, he aggressively closes the distance while firmly gripping his hilt. In one fluid sequence, he unsheathes his blade. Finally armed, he channels his sprint. Slicing through the airborne rubble, he launches himself directly at the towering brute. A deafening metallic shriek violently echoes throughout the cavern. Despite the swarming ring of deadly mechanisms, stepping backward isn't even an option. He continues his relentless march. Those crimson execution lines ignite across the floor tiles, vividly mapping out the entire battlefield for him to totally dominate. He begins dancing through the deadly grid, with a cocky smirk pulls at the corner of his mouth. As raw confidence completely suffocates he finally grasps the reality of his cheat skills. His resurrection and inversion abilities literally transform endless slaughter into infinite strength. The holographic interface flashes, confirming that limitless respawns trigger, but every single reset comes with a brutal stat reduction. Scanning the logs, he realizes his inversion trait has completely hijacked the system, flipping those right into monumental across-the-board buffs. Armed with this insanely broken combo, claiming the title of the absolute strongest is suddenly well within his grasp. Adrenaline and raw magic course through his veins, leaving him completely awestruck by his rapidly skyrocketing numbers. The weak, pathetic past version of himself would have rotted in this dungeon, but this upgraded variant, he is about to violently channeling every ounce of that fresh, god-tier energy. He unleashes an explosive upward slash that completely eviscerates the ceiling above him. A terrifying crimson aura engulfs both his physical form and his blade, as he completely surrenders to the destructive rush. Launching himself like a human missile, he drills a brute. The crumbling death trap vanishes into the abyss beneath his boots as he violently ascends to the upper floor. Touching down on the new battleground, he tosses out a mockingly casual apology for keeping the boss waiting. A towering, multi-horned fiend steps from the shadows, and he confidently strides right into its personal. The opening clash is a spectacular display of raw savagery. Parrying the blow, he effortlessly chains into a devastating horizontal sweep, forcing the massive creature to stagger backward. Dropping into a crouch, the fiend glares at him, its predatory instincts finally registering that this human is a completely different breed. Smirking maliciously, he dares the creature to take another shot at putting him in the dirt. In response, the beast erupts, with a suffocating pitch-black aura, winding up for a truly catastrophic strike. Grinning like a maniac, he fully embraces the escalating stakes and readies his counter. He casually asks the monster the ultimate question. How long can a mortal beast realistically survive against a guy wielding an infinite supply of extra lives? Exploding off his back foot, he instantly closes the gap, trapping the fiend in a suffocating melee. Ducking beautifully under the monstrous guard, he delivers a blindingly fast laceration. Amidst the relentless, he physically feels the undeniable truth of his swelling stats. This overpowered growth spurt allows him to completely overwhelm the boss. The paralyzing terror that used to accompany these demonic strikes has completely evaporated. Staring dead into its glowing eyes, he coldly informs the beast that it just isn't. Fueled by that determination, he plants a brutal right hook straight into the demon's jaw. He follows up by shattering the ground beneath them, throwing the fiend completely off balance. Thinking he finally has the edge, he prematurely claims the win. But a violent eruption of purple aura quickly proved he opened his mouth way too soon. A blinding laser rips through the arena, making him dive desperately out of the danger zone. The monster's dark energy explodes outward, swallowing the entire room. As the thick dust settles, the beast remains on its feet, its chest radiating a sinister glowing light. Far from finished, it channels a terrifying amount of magic into its razor-sharp talons. Gearing up for round 2, he scrapes by, the next slash by a hair, muttering about how insanely close that was. Catching his breath, he finally pins. There's no way in hell this thing is just your run-of-the-mill level 3 grunt. According to the system's own logic, heavy hitters like this are locked away on the upper tiers, never down in the mud. So if this genuinely is the third zone, an absolute unit like this shouldn't even exist here. But before he can piece the puzzle together, the brute lunges right at his throat. The ambush launches him violently against the solid stone wall. Yet even while frantically blocking, his mind races, calculating his opponent's moves and his own skyrocketing stats. He realizes that stacking up all those deadly curses has already boosted his physical capabilities to an insane degree. And that makes the whole situation even crazier. Because even with those massive buffs, this freak of nature still completely outclasses anything that belongs on this level. Parrying another lethal horizontal sweep, he decides to beat the answers out of his opponent. He explodes off the back foot, refusing to let the monster control the rhythm of the brawl. Touching down, he aggressively demands to know what kind of anomaly he is actually fighting. This isn't just idle curiosity anymore. He is dead certain. The beast gives zero explanation. All he gets in return is an icy glare and a suffocating wave of pure. Instead, the entity boldly proclaims that the power standing before him is way beyond human comprehension. It decides to end the game, right then and there. Raising both massive arms, it conjures 2 terrifying orbs of apocalyptic magic. Spotting the stance shift instantly, he smirks and taunts the beast for finally needing both hands to take him down. But then, the smile fades. The very air and stone. The monster completely annihilates the room, with a focused, blinding explosion. It instantly follows up, showering the battlefield in an endless volley of magical artillery. Reading the deadly shift in momentum, our hero knows the beast is finally going all out. Not backing down, he digs deep into his own crimson aura, ready to meet the onslaught, head-on. A colossal shockwave of black and crimson carnage erupts from the demon. He is forced into a frantic, high-speed dance to survive the carpet-bombing, cursing the suffocating pressure. Yet even walking through literal hellfire, he keeps pushing forward. He finds a split-second gap in the storm and launches his counteroffensive. Colliding at point-blank range, the sheer impact of their combined auras blows the surrounding ruins into dust. Deadlocked in a bitter clash of strength, he grits his teeth, telling himself he is just inches away from flipping. He pushes back against the crushing weight with every ounce of muscle he possesses, but the creature mercilessly charges up its chest core once more. Trapped at zero distance, the horrifying realization hits him. He cannot block this. The beam completely engulfs him, ripping right through his flesh. The cold, robotic voice of the system rings out, confirming his death. This time around, the fatal penalty hits him with a permanent debuff to his raw physical power. But his broken passive skill kicks in. The inversion flips that severe handicap right into a massive strength boost. He spawns right back in the demon's face, pulsating with wasting absolutely zero time. He lunges the exact millisecond he breathes again. The brutal revived offensive actually forces the Titan to stumble backward through the rubble. The beast is absolutely furious, enraged by a pathetic human who just refuses to stay dead. He lets his fists do the talking, though the agonizing trauma of getting killed still burns fiercely in his nerves. Trading rapid, bone-crushing blows, he silently curses the fact that coming back to life doesn't make dying hurt any less. Weaponizing that sheer agony, he goes completely feral, throwing his entire body weight into a devastating charge. Thanks to the system's glitch, he is finally man. But the grim reality checks in fast. Raw muscle alone isn't going to secure the final kill. The fiend quickly adapts, throwing lethal counters to prevent him from landing that one game-ending shot. The air hums with deadly magic as the creature winds up for another catastrophic wipeout mechanic. He gambles everything, trying to shatter the spell with pure force. But the volatile energy backfires. A blind spot opens up, and the blast catches. A white-hot blast swallows him whole before he can even blink. The cold system prompt flashes, registering his demise and slapping him with a permanent agility debuff. But his inversion skill hijacks the penalty, twisting that fatal curse into a massive speed boost. Gasping back to life, he instantly feels the shift. This time, the Grim Reaper didn't hand him raw strength. It gifted him pure velocity. His eyes snap open. This is exactly the missing puzzle. Staring down the demonic beast once more, ice runs through his veins. The scales have completely tipped in his favor. He silently gives the monster credit for pushing him to this insane level of growth, but playtime is officially over. He is ready to finish this on his own terms. He launches forward, breaking the sound barrier with a speed the creature couldn't possibly anticipate. The fiend swipes to crush him, but it's swinging at ghosts. He phantoms right past it in a dizzying blur. A blinding, crackling azure trail is the only evidence of his lethal slash. The beast jerks around in pure terror, only to find its prey already standing behind it. Its glowing core violently ruptures, exposing a devastating, fatal wound. Without bothering to glance back, he softly declares, "Game over." As the Titan crumbles into dust, he coldly reflects on their difference. Unlike his infinite loop, this creature only had one life. In the end, this boss never stood a ghost of a chance against a rigged system. He lets that grim reality hang in the quiet aftermath of the slaughter, before whispering an eerie goodbye, promising that whether it is in the depths of hell or some other twisted realm, he hopes their paths cross again. Looming over the fading corpse, a solitary crimson iris flaring in the dark. He swears he will be waiting when the time comes. The bloodied warrior catches his breath, squaring his shoulders to tackle whatever hellish trial comes. Flashing a cocky smirk, he throws out an open challenge, proving that brushing shoulders with death hasn't shaken his iron grit. Then the adrenaline fades. He collapses to the dirt, letting out a massive sigh of relief, completely mind-blown that he actually pulled off that victory. But that sweet high instantly sours. Reality hits hard. Despite leveling up, he still had to literally die twice to get here. Glancing down at his trusty blade, he sees the metal stressed beyond repair. The steel shatters into jagged shards right in his palm, a harsh reminder of his garbage-tier equipment. He doesn't waste time crying over spilled milk. The mission is obvious. Spotting the glowing mana cores scattered around the boss room, dollar signs flash in his eyes. The hustle is incredibly straightforward. Liquidate the loot, buy a deadlier toy. He eagerly scoops up every precious gem the dungeon spit out. Hauling his stash back down to the floor, one sanctuary he steps into, the rare oasis where bloodthirsty mobs cannot spawn. The system mechanics dictate that every single level kicks off with a completely shielded hub. It operates as the ultimate pit stop for battered hunters to patch up their wounds and swap intel. You have got veterans kicking back with a drink right next to rookies, so utterly drained they are just. Plus, the dungeon strictly pays out those who grind blessing explorers, with rare drops and secret treasure troves. Shrewd merchants pitch their tents right in the middle of the hub, eager to fence whatever shiny trinkets the players drag in. Flexing his newly earned bankroll, he cops a sleek silver broadsword, thrilled to grip a weapon that will not disintegrate after 3 swings. Still, that price tag is a massive gut punch, practically bankrupting his fresh stash of cores. But he aggressively shakes off the buyer's remorse. He strictly reminds himself that the only way out is up. To justify the empty wallet, he rationalizes the gear as a mandatory down payment on his future service. Scanning the crowded plaza, he suddenly feels the heavy weight of a dozen players staring at him. He catches their hushed whispers, mocking him as the total sucker who actually bought the infinite revival skill. Their sheer, unadulterated pity confirms his he deadpans at the bitter reality. To them, he is just a tragic loser, cursed with a brutally useless gimmick. Slightly pissed off, he mutters that somebody could have at least given him a heads up before he got thoroughly scammed. But then his mind flashes back to that glowing system prompt right after his skull got crushed. The ultimate punishing handicap was completely shattered by the sheer brokenness of his inversion trait. Instead of getting permanently nerfed to oblivion, the game flipped the script, injecting him with raw stats. The absolute cheat code clicks into place. Infinite revival matched with inversion isn't a joke, it is an unbelievably god-tier synergy. That massive lightbulb moment solidifies one glorious fact: he is sitting on a goldmine build that literally nobody else can use. He inwardly chuckles at the pure irony of it all, loving that these arrogant elites think his ultimate trump card is absolute garbage. His smug little moment gets shattered by loud yelling erupting a few feet away. He pivots toward the chaos and sees a massive mob of players aggressively locking horns. The raging beef who gets first dibs on raiding the level 5 mid-boss chamber. A massive brute named Nojishi is soaking up the crowd's praises, throwing around the title of Dominator like he owns the place. The moment that name hits our hero's ears, a warning bell rings in his head. He knows exactly what kind of scum Nojishi really is. See, a Dominator isn't just a fancy nickname. It's an elite badge of honor for the gutsy few who tackle the brutal boss rooms at the peak of a tower. And since crushing that final boss literally wipes the entire dungeon off the map, whoever reaches that high altitude holds absolute power over the lower. Plus, clearing those upper levels guarantees some insanely overpowered, one-of-a-kind loot. Normally, average climbers treat Dominators like royalty. But with a rotten personality like Nojishi's, the whole hero worship thing feels like a sick joke. Squinting through the crowd, our guy spots the giant picking a fight with two very familiar. The fiery Mana isn't backing down. She totally trashes his fake authority, snapping that just speedrunning to a low-level mid-boss doesn't make him a god. Yuri frantically tugs her arm, whispering that sparking a war right now is a terrible idea. But Mana is seeing red. She fiercely argues that their squad scouted this boss room first, and this oversized bully is straight up hijacking their hard-earned loot. Yuri bites her lip, admitting that the potential drop pool, but clashing with a so-called Dominator, could easily get them killed. Mana clenches her fists, completely disgusted by the sheer injustice, yet deeply aware that her friend is right. Catching their hesitation, the brute's face twists into a slimy smirk. Treating the girls like lost puppies, he barks at them to sit back and watch, while a real Dominator sweeps up the premium gear. Just to rub it in, he flashes his ultra-rare shield, basking in the glow of his own ego. The message is crystal clear: bend the knee or get crushed. He glares down at Mana and Yuri, demanding they surrender their spot, without another peep. Right on cue, our protagonist strolls into the spotlight. He flashes a breezy wave at the girls, instantly shattering the giant's tense atmosphere. The massive tank practically foams at the mouth. Being treated like background noise makes his blood boil. Slapping on a nasty, condescending grin, Nojishi shouts out the newcomer's name. Suddenly, the crowd's hushed whispers morph into a wave of public mockery. The brute ruthlessly mocks him, laughing about how he got scammed by a shady vendor into buying an absolutely garbage skill. He calls him a pathetic loser, sneering that being a sucker perfectly fits his aesthetic. The words are sharp, but our hero doesn't even flinch. Instead, a chillingly calm, totally unreadable smile creeps across his face. Completely brushing off the trash talk, he casually turns to the girls and tells them to just hand the mid-boss over to the giant. Mana's jaw hits the floor. She can't fathom why he would bow down to this total jerk. But the protagonist just keeps talking, his casual tone forcing even Nojishi to tune in. Then he drops the real bombshell. While the brute squad is busy sweating over the mid-boss, he wants the three of them to bypass this floor entirely and raid the tower's ultimate boss room. He confidently states that with his newly upgraded speed, this so-called Dominator wouldn't even be able to catch his shadow. Yuri stares at him, absolutely blown away by this insane leap in logic. But he meets her eyes, promising this isn't some wild bluff. He already mapped out the perfect winning strategy. The cocky grin gets wiped right off Nojishi's face. He finally realizes roaring in pure rage, the massive tank launches a brutal haymaker straight at our hero's head. Time seems to slow down. Takamichi's razor, the giant charges forward, screaming that this isn't bullying, desperately trying to disguise his fragile ego as righteous justice. With terrifying grace, the protagonist sidesteps the devastating blow. In a fraction of a second, he delivers a counterattack so blindingly fast, the giant's eyes can't even register. Takamichi smoothly regains his footing, looking as bored as if he just swatted away a mildly annoying mosquito. Nojishi freezes, his brain short-circuiting as he tries to process the phantom strike. By the time the pain actually hits his nerves, he is already flat on his back, utterly humiliated in front of the entire gallery. His lackeys scramble toward him in total panic, completely mind-blown by how their heavy hitter just got launched into orbit. The brute lays there paralyzed by shock. Our guy casually steps over him, looking down with icy disdain, asking if he plans on taking a nap on the dirty floor all day. Then he mercilessly twists the knife, sarcastically sighing that he was really looking forward to seeing the almighty Dominator struggle against a basic mid-boss. Seeing the sheer terror in the giant's eyes, our hero gives a satisfied smirk. He casually waves at Mana and Yuri, signaling them to move out, treating his crazy master plan like an absolute done deal. Cut to the 4th floor. The girls have officially placed their bets on him, trailing closely behind as they plunge deeper into the deadly labyrinth. He catches one of the girls shifting her posture, gearing up for a heavy talk. Mana cuts right to the chase. She questions if letting Nojishi's squad take the lead is actually a smart move. Then she drops her second worry. Despite all his swagger, she just doesn't buy that our guy is genuinely strong. Yuri nods along, her anxiety bubbling up. The beasts they've clashed with so far were already vicious enough to completely slaughter weaker fighters, and promises them they will be perfectly fine. But inwardly, he sizes up the 2 women he crossed paths with inside this tower, quietly comparing their stats to his own. Mana sits at level 15, and Yuri at 13, while he is stuck way down at level 8. He completely gets why they doubt him. Still, he knows his raw fighting power has skyrocketed way beyond what that little number suggests. If push comes to shove, he is dead certain he could wipe the floor with everyone around him, level gap be damned. Their quiet moment shatters when Nojishi's crew hollers from the front lines. Overflowing with arrogance, Nojishi graciously invites them to watch his squad, but he lays down the law. They will not lift a single finger to help with the low-tier trap. Our guy smirks inwardly. It looks like Nojishi fully recovered his swagger after choking so hard earlier. Suddenly, a chilling aura chokes the air. Bloodthirsty presences box the party in from every possible angle, and a scaly, reptilian freak lunges first. Nojishi scrambles to react. He slams his unique shield up, absorbing the brutal impact, proving the heavy gear is legitimately top tier. Instantly, he sweeps his weapon in a vicious counterattack, blasting the beast backward. The monster skids across the dirt, hissing, and the system tags the foe a lizard man, a lethal bipedal reptile built specifically for close-quarters slaughter. It lets out an ear-piercing shriek, prepping another charge. Nojishi just chuckles, assuming a lone lizard man is total cannon fodder. But a cold shiver suddenly crawls down our hero's spine. He opens his mouth to shout a warning. His survival instincts scream at him, confirming this ambush is 100 times deadlier than it looks. He shifts into a combat stance, but the nightmare is already spilling into reality. Dozens of shadowy figures bleed out of the darkness, until a suffocating, endless swarm of reptiles entirely The smug grin melts off Nojishi's face. Total panic sets in as the sheer tidal wave of scales and claws closes the gap. Then, boom, boom. A heavy, ground-shaking footstep announces the arrival of an alpha. A towering, crimson-scaled leader struts. The system flags the Titan, a lizard commander, an elite-tier monster that dictates the swarm. Without a second of hesitation, the Alpha launches its assault, proving this is a full-blown deathmatch. The horde floods in from all points of the compass, crushing the party inside a shrinking cage of rusty blades and snapping jaws. Our guy roots his feet, bracing himself against the suffocating pressure of the bloodbath. His eyes flash a brilliant, menacing red. He forces his brain into overdrive, cutting through the Mana barks an order, snapping Yuri out of her daze. She makes a split-second call they have to act as human shields for our. Yuri instantly agrees. Throwing caution to the wind, the 2 girls dive right in front of him to block the incoming slaughter. Our hero blinks, genuinely stunned. They are actually risking their necks for him instead of ditching him to die. He speaks up, absolutely refusing to be treated like useless deadweight. Mana ruthlessly shuts that down. She snaps at him to stop playing the tough guy when he is so severely outgunned. The harsh rebuke leaves him frozen for a second. She doesn't sugarcoat it. These beasts are leagues above his pay grade. He swallows his bitter frustration, but that brutal dismissal definitely strikes a nerve. Yuri calls out to him, her voice trembling, desperately trying to ground him before his bruised ego makes him do something suicidal. She begs him to fall back into the shadows, warning that lingering on the front line is an absolute death sentence. Refusing to give up a single inch of ground, she anchors the vanguard all by herself. Yuri backs her up, hurling explosive, magical artillery from a safe distance to reinforce their defense. Across the battlefield, Nojishi recklessly throws himself into the meat grinder. He is hell-bent on proving his dominance through pure barbaric. Watching these people bleed to protect him leaves our guy totally rattled. His fingers twitch over his weapon. He is violently torn between falling back like a coward or stepping up to hijack the battlefield. That split second of hesitation proves just how deeply the girls judge. As Mana and Yuri wage a desperate war right in front of him, the dark cloud in his head finally clears. He absolutely despises being looked down on as a helpless burden. That ugly gnawing sensation rapidly boils over into pure rage and crushing self-disgust. All around him, the battlefield explodes into total chaos. His crew holds the line, fighting tooth and nail without needing his backup. Out of nowhere, a brutal blow blindsides Nojishi mid-brawl, proving even the resident powerhouse is getting swamped. He scrambles to regain his footing and strike back, but the relentless onslaught keeps staggering him. A second crushing hit sends him skidding backward, making it painfully clear the endless swarm is completely dictating this bloodbath. As he stumbles, he realizes a second too late that the very ground beneath them is giving way. Our protagonist instantly recognizes the dungeon just triggered a deadly failsafe. The stone crumbles beneath his boots, and he plunges straight into a pitch-black abyss while his squad is left stranded above. He thrashes in midair, the sudden vertical drop ripping him right out of the war zone. Mana and Yuri shriek his name in horror as the shadows swallow him whole. Plummeting through the dark, he grits his teeth bitterly, wondering why he is the one taking the plunge, instead of Nojishi. This is the cruel reality of Hermes Tower. Another victim claimed by its ruthless architecture. The place is rigged with lethal snares designed to turn confident hunters at a moment's notice. Free falling through the void, he forces his heart rate down. No panic, just cold, hard calculation. A cheap trick like this, it doesn't faze him anymore. He's already walked through hell and stared death in the face. His eyes lock onto the rapidly approaching floor. Channeling his aura, he crashes into the earth like a meteor. The shockwave obliterates the stone tiles, absorbing the impact entirely, instead of shattering his bones. He steps out of the dust cloud, rolls his shoulders, confirms he doesn't have a single scratch, and immediately takes command of the situation. Trapped alone in this subterranean arena, the sinister scraping of claws echoes in the dark. He slowly turns to face whatever nightmare the dungeon throws at him next. Yoshito stands dead center in the crumbling ruins. Heavily armored lizardmen slither out of the shadows, boxing him in completely. He realizes this isn't just a random pitfall. It's a designated slaughterhouse. Towering above the grunts are multiple elite lizardman commanders. Every single exit is blocked off. He accepts that but instead of sweating bullets, his blood boils. He is so utterly sick of playing the victim to these twisted dungeon mechanics. The steel sings as he draws his brand new blade, and crimson energy erupts from his body, the exact power upgrade he's been itching to unleash. Pissed off and radiating lethal intent, Yoshito glares at the elite squad. The commander's action. To him, this isn't an ambush. It's a live fire testing facility for his new gear. Even as the monsters hiss and spit, promising him a slow, agonizing death, Yoshito fully commits to the bloodbath. He rockets forward in a blinding crimson blur, shredding the frontline vanguard before they can. Every ounce of frustration from being dragged into this hellhole morphs into pure, unadulterated killing intent. As steel clashes against scales, he suddenly realizes that just days ago, a single high-tier commander would have butchered him in seconds. A massive elite drops from the ceiling, aiming to crush his skull and catch him off guard. Yoshito doesn't even flinch. He meets the plunging strike head-on. Before the beast can process the counter, Yoshito slips straight through its defenses. One fluid razor-sharp arc and the commander is cleaved right open. His hyper-tuned reflexes and blood-red aura push his speed far beyond absolute human limits. As another monster hits the dirt, an undeniable realization washes over him. He isn't just surviving this. He is going to slaughter. A massive wave of reptilian muscle swarms him, aiming to crush. He weaves through their crude thrusts, like a phantom his blade, carving a bloody highway straight through the mob. With wide, the beasts dart their heads in sheer confusion. He's moving so fast he's literally vanishing from their line of sight. He explodes out the back of their phalanx. A split second later, a trail of dismembered bodies hits the floor in perfect sync. The massacre halts for a breath. Yoshito flicks the blood off his blade, his instincts screaming that this entire ambush was custom-tailored exactly for him. His predatory eyes sweep over the surviving elites, piecing the puzzle together. Staring down the remaining commanding officers, he calls them out for sitting in the shadows, waiting for him to drop in. Then he spreads his arms and openly dares. The taunt works. The scaled freaks roar in blind fury and stampede forward. Yoshito dives straight into the meat grinder before they can lock down a perimeter again. For the absolute first time in his life, he isn't just surviving. He is fighting with lethal precision, completely dominating. The days of being the pathetic deadweight hiding behind his squad are officially over. Fueled by this ironclad resolve, he unleashes a devastating shockwave of steel, blasting heavy armored lizardmen across the room. As the surviving monsters actually start backing away in pure terror, Yoshito stalks forward, coldly stating that he knows exactly how terrified they are, because he's already lived through. He isn't screaming or raging. His dead, emotionless tone amplifies the absolute. He casually butchers another grunt, reminding the rest that he is intimately familiar with the dread freezing their cold blood. Because he intimately knows their agony, he refuses to give them a single shred of mercy. He promises to violently hack apart every single scaly bastard who still dares to lift a weapon until the very. Yoshito finally exhales, letting the brutal reality sink in. He actually slaughtered every last one of them. With the cap, his eyes lock onto a hidden exit. Realizing his only way out of this hellhole is straight up, he marches toward the escape route. A heavy sealed doorway blocks his path, but as it grinds open, Yoshito steps out of the shadows. Waiting right on the other side are Yuri and Mana. Yuri's breath hitches at the sight of him actually breathing. She screams his name and instantly sprints over. Her hands frantically check him for fatal wounds, but finding him completely intact, the sheer panic finally melts from her eyes. A massive wave of relief crashes over her. He actually made it out alive. Her voice shaking, Yuri admits she desperately tried to dive in after him, but the path had totally collapsed, leaving zero way down. Cutting and Mana squints, asking if any freaks jumped him on his trek back up. Yoshito pauses. Masking the utter bloodbath he just caused, he casually shrugs it off, claiming the coast was totally clear. But deep down, the image of that gruesome mountain of lizard-man corpses flashes in his mind. A flat-out lie. Quickly changing the subject, he asks where Nojishi and the rest of the squad vanished to. Mana scoffs, explaining how they had to fend off a swarm of reptiles, while Nojishi instantly wrote Yoshito off as a corpse. Without missing a beat, that coward bolted straight for the boss room, completely ignoring the fact that he was the idiot who triggered the trap in the. Yoshito totally brushes off the rage, laughing that tossing people under the bus is just classic Nojishi. Then looking right into their eyes, he skillfully steers the vibe away from all the bitter resentment. He hits them with a genuine, heartfelt thank you for sticking around. That raw gratitude completely disarms both girls, melting their fierce expressions into shy, blushing smiles. But there is no time to stand around. Yoshito snaps them back to reality, urging a dead sprint to hunt down Nojishi's crew. But right before they take a single step, a razor-sharp chill spikes down Yoshito's spine. A rogue lizard man explodes from the shadows right behind the girls. Yoshito instantly clicks that this straggler must have slipped past Nojishi's pathetic front line. Roaring Yuri's name, he launches himself like a missile straight into the line of fire. A millisecond is all it takes. The monster's brutal blade halts just inches from Yuri's throat, blocked by a desperate, lightning-fast parry from Yoshito. Mana's jaw drops. She watches in pure disbelief as he throws his life on the line without a single ounce of hesitation. He digs his heels deep into the stone, absorbing the crushing kinetic force to keep the edge away from Yuri, making Mana realize just how inches away they were from a gruesome tragedy. Gritting his teeth, Yoshito shoves the hulking beast back, acting as a human shield, while Yuri just stares up at him, entirely paralyzed by shock. Snapping out of her daze, Mana aggressively tags into the brawl, yelling at them to stand back. With one blindingly fast, magic-infused slash, she rips the beast to shreds. Wiping her blade, she confesses that ambush was lethally close. Glancing back, she fully grasps the catastrophic bloodbath Yoshito just narrowly averted. Meanwhile, Yoshito stares down at his own hand, realizing he's gripping a radiating blue sword. His instincts had literally forced him to summon a weapon faster than his brain could even process. Still trembling, Yuri fumbles to string a sentence together. She finally chokes out a massive thank you for saving her life. He rubs the back of his neck awkwardly, muttering how glad he is that he made it. Mana just watches the two with a sly, knowing smirk. Stepping in, she grills Yoshito on how he pulled off those insane, superhuman reflexes against a total blindside attack. A silent spark of pride flares up inside him. He is actually pulling his weight now. In his mind, he firmly buries the loser he used to be. He is definitely no longer the party's dead weight. The scenery morphs drastically as the trio ascends to floor 5 of the Hermes Magic Tower. The group pushes forward into a set of neon green-lit ruins. Striding through the eerie glow, Yoshito boots up his system interface. Scrolling through the absolute carnage in his combat log, he confirms that wiping out that entire squad of Commander-tier lizards rocketed him up 2 full levels instantly. His brain kicks into overdrive, breaking down the exact mechanics behind his growth. He deduces that baseline level-up stats are completely detached from or nasty curses, meaning his broken inversion ability will not accidentally reverse his core progression. Running the numbers on this newfound power, he notices something wild. The raw stat bumps from leveling up are actually way more pathetic than he hyped them up to be. But when stacked against the god-tier attack boost he squeezed out by inverting his death penalty, the gap in raw damage is absolutely Those traditional level-up gains feel like complete pocket change now. Yoshito's eyes widen as it hits him. Combining that brutal death curse with his inversion skill is not just strong, it is a completely game-breaking cheat. The realization sends a massive jolt of adrenaline right through him. Yuri suddenly snaps him out of his power trip, pointing a shaky finger dead ahead. They freeze in front of a colossal set of iron doors, immediately recognizing it as the 5th mid-boss chamber. Mana breaks down the raid info, explaining that Hermes supposedly bottoms out at floor 10. With the raid still warming up, she wagers this ominous room marks the exact halfway point to conquering the tower. She points out that she and Yuri actually discovered it first. But when they retreated to gear up for the clash, Nojishi completely ambushed them right there. Just flashing back to that dirty encounter makes Mana's blood boil all over again. Yuri frantically tries to talk her down, while Yoshito just watches their petty bickering with a dry, amused smirk. Brushing the drama aside, Yoshito figures Nojishi's crew has to be right around the corner. He pushes the heavy doors open, warning the girls that a mid-boss demands absolute caution, regardless of their preparation. But the second his boot hits the floor, the vibe feels totally off. He takes a slow, calculated step inside. The massive circular arena ahead of him is already an absolute war zone. A brutal shockwave sends one fighter flying across the chamber like a rag doll. The sheer impact leaves Yoshito totally stunned. Another deafening crash shakes the nearby walls, proving just how utterly savage this brawl is. Yoshito braces himself as the thick dust finally clears. Right in the dead center of the room, he locks eyes on Nojishi, squaring off against a towering beast. Catching Yoshito out of the corner of his eye, Nojishi actually looks genuinely shocked that he survived their little trap. He barks at Yoshito to take a good hard look at their opponent. The hulking nightmare is none other than the arena's mid-boss. Letting out an ear-piercing roar, the creature announces itself as the Orc Lord. It then blindly bulldozes straight toward Nojishi with terrifying momentum. Yoshito yells out Nojishi's name in pure panic. But the arrogant warrior just brushes him off, snapping that he doesn't need any handouts from trash. Standing his ground, Nojishi meets the stampede head-on, entirely engulfed in a blazing defensive aura. He calculates the monster's strike with a cocky grin. His signature shield skill, Aegis Nemesis, effortlessly absorbs the beast's devastating smash. Nojishi scoffs, explaining that he only struggled against those lizardmen earlier because their ambush caught him completely off guard. But a straight-up one-on-one duel, that's a totally different story. Declaring that losing simply isn't an option, he orders Yoshito to keep his eyes peeled. Swearing to prove he's evolved far past the guy Yoshito used to know, Nojishi aggressively rushes the Orc Lord, treating his old teammate like an absolute nobody. Hanging back at the room's edge, Yuri nervously checks to see if Yoshito is still holding up after that intense shockwave. Yoshito mutters back with a bitter, almost grudging respect, admitting that Nojishi looks incredibly badass right now. Especially since just one stray hit was enough to send Yoshito flying. Studying the high-speed clash, he notices that Nojishi isn't even flinching under the monster's relentless barrage. Without missing a beat, Nojishi demands once again that Yoshito watch him work. Yoshito quietly stews on the guy's arrogant boast about finally proving his true worth. Yet that cocky attitude perfectly matches the massive creature's sheer disgust for the weak. Out of nowhere, the beast unleashes a long-range shockwave that rips straight across the arena. The brutal slash erupts against the ground, shattering solid stone like glass. Yoshito barely dodges the deadly blast as it shreds the air right past his face. Meanwhile, Nojishi just flashes a wicked grin, practically untouchable behind his eye. The Orc Lord's crimson eyes flare up, winding up for another savage assault. It lunges forward with blistering speed, forcing Nojishi to violently trade blow for blow. Following up with a bone-crushing sweeping strike, the beast tries to flatten him into paste. A relentless barrage of impacts violently hammers the cratered floor around Nojishi as their deadly exchange kicks into maximum overdrive. Surprisingly, the towering monster remains perfectly composed, clearly hinting it has plenty left in the... Slowly but surely it starts unveiling the absolute terrifying power of a genuine mid-boss. But Nojishi stubbornly refuses to accept that this pathetic output is all the beast can muster. He even laughs it off, bragging that if this is the creature's maximum, this fight is already in the bag. Watching safely from a distance, Yoshito studies how easily his old rival anchors the front line. Then it hits him. Yoshito suddenly spots the dirty little secret. He recognizes the guy's shield as an ultra-rare drop from a notoriously brutal Magic Tower boss. Realizing it's an exclusive piece of unique gear, Yoshito pieces it all together. Nojishi's personal base stats aren't actually anything special. It's purely that broken shield, completely nullifying every single hit the boss throws. The hulking monster furiously keeps hammering away at its target, but the glowing bulwark effortlessly swallows up every ounce of damage, smirking as the entire momentum of the fight sharply swings his way. Nojishi rides a high of absolute confidence. He violently mocks the boss for leaning on completely predictable basic attacks. Sensing the opening, the rest of his squad unleashes a highly coordinated assault that brings the massive beast crashing to its knees. With their golden opportunity wide open, the fighters frantically signal each other to execute the final phase. Their combined, devastating strike flattens the colossal ogre directly into... Down on the arena dirt, the beast staggers, completely shell-shocked by the sudden shift in momentum. But before it can even catch its breath, another strike rains down from above. Nojishi rockets into the air, capitalizing on the creature's... He sneers, shouting that this ugly brute just made a lethal blunder by dropping its guard. A brutal finishing move crashes down. The mid-boss shrieks in a mix of agony and sheer rage. As the debris settles, the hulking menace lies completely flatlined, letting the squad finally catch their breath around its corpse. Nojishi whips his head toward Takemichi, practically begging for a round of applause. Sticking his chest out, he brags that this is the raw power of a top-tier player. But instead of stroking his ego, Takemichi just flashes. He casually mentions that this fight definitely proved how insane unique grade gear can be. Naturally, Nojishi totally misreads the comment as genuine worship, and his ego balloons out of control. Chuckling like a maniac, he mocks the rest of the party, claiming these scrubs would be dead meat against a mid-boss without his carry. One of their teammates shoots him a wary glance, completely thrown off by his... But a second later, that same teammate stammers frantically, pointing at something behind them. The crew spins around their eyes, locking onto a blindingly radiant loot box that just spawned in. Nojishi aggressively shoves everyone back, dead set on claiming whatever god-tier drop is waiting. He sprints toward the prize, utterly convinced this haul will blow the Aegis Nemesis completely out of the water. Takemichi's smirk vanishes. Something is wrong. A reward this absurdly flashy for a measly fifth. He dives forward to rip Nojishi away from the lid. But it's too late. The arrogant fool has completely let his guard down. The rest of the squad suddenly remembers the golden rule of these dungeons. They are literally designed to slaughter careless players. The sickening reality crashes down on them. The loot is a decoy. Nojishi rips the chest open, only to stare into an empty void. His smug grin melts into sheer panic as crimson runes ignite across the stone floor. The snare triggers, instantly erupting in a blinding shockwave that swallows the entire team before anyone can even flinch. A vicious warp spell floods their vision with pure white. As the glare finally dies down, they are dumped into an entirely new dungeon zone. The air is freezing, suffocatingly dark. Takemichi scans the shadows in pure shock, completely lost on their new coordinates. The blonde girl instantly clocks the heavy vibe, terrified that they just got dragged into the dungeon's ultimate meat grinder. Nojishi spits out a string of curses, absolutely losing his mind over this rigged. He stammers that the suffocating aura in this room matches the absolute peak of a high-tier. Takemichi grills him, demanding the brutal truth. And Nojishi admits it. This kind of god-level pressure only exists at the summit. He chokes out the grim reality. They just got teleported straight to the final floor. Before the panic can even settle, sinister glyphs. Through the murky fog, a colossal silhouette slowly rises. Giant, heavily armored boots slam into the ground, violently shaking the entire cavern. The shadows pull back to reveal the lord of this domain. The squad realizes with absolute horror this is the final. Two piercing, glowing eyes snap open. A tidal wave of pure, unfiltered bloodlust floods the arena, paralyzing every single player. Takemichi grinds his teeth, barely processing that they just stumbled into the ultimate death trap. Piercing red alarm lights lock the doors tight. As utter hysteria grips the crew, a system prompt flashes, confirming the brutal truth. Forced warp to the final boss arena, sitting at the very peak of the Hermes Magic Tower. Takemichi's blood runs cold. The titan standing before them isn't just a regular dungeon lord. It is the undisputed sovereign of this hellhole, the Ogre Emperor. Without warning, the behemoth blitzes them with mind-numbing speed. The team scatters in pure chaos as someone screams to dodge. The beast's devastating opening attack craters the stone floor, nearly vaporizing the entire squad in a single swing. Takemichi instantly calculates the odds. This monster eclipses anything he has ever fought. Even factoring in his own buffs, their base stats are pathetic in comparison. Fighting this thing head-to-head is guaranteed suicide. He barks at the others to fall back, swearing he will hold the line against the titan alone. Nojishi screams that it's a death wish, warning Takemichi that he'll be ripped apart. But Takemichi fully embraces the danger without blinking. Ditching his bravado, Nojishi orders the rest of the crew to run for their lives before it's too late. Desperate to buy them time, one of the swordsmen recklessly charges in for a sacrificial strike. His steel bites clean into the Emperor's massive frame. Seeing the window, a second warrior lunges in for the kill. For a split second, victory seems certain, but the tyrant rises without a scratch, shrugging off the strike like it was nothing but a breeze. Nojishi unleashes a deafening roar of absolute rage, refusing to be treated like a helpless insect. Planting his feet, he screams his own legendary title and hurls his entire being into a suicidal, all-or-nothing blitz. His blade blurs across the throne room, carrying every last ounce of his raw power. But the Colossus answers with a devastating backhand before the steel can even connect. In a sickening flash of gore, Nojishi is instant. The rest of the party shrieks in sheer terror as their comrade is butchered right in front of them. Takemichi freezes, entirely paralyzed by the overwhelming gap in their strength. He realizes his Aegis Nemesis is useless. His stats are simply too pathetic to trigger its ultimate shield. The merciless system interface chimes in, confirming the legendary artifact is completely dead in the water. A glowing crimson alert screams that his insufficient stats block the activation. As Nojishi bleeds out on the cold stone, Takemichi swallows the bitter truth. Their ultimate trump card is a shattered swordsman drops to his knees, howling his fallen friend's name in pure agony. "Get the hell away from him!" Takemichi bellows, his instincts screaming danger. But he is a second too late. The Emperor's follow-up cleave annihilates the entire space around the corpse. Only the shattered blade of Nojishi remains drowning in a rapidly expanding pool of crimson. Takemichi grinds his teeth, his knuckles turning white. Swallowing his despair, he forcefully anchors his shattered nerves. Glaring up at the monstrosity, he curses his luck and digs his heels in for a final stand. The colossal Ogre Emperor stalks forward, each booming footstep dripping with absolute arrogance. The blonde girl hysterically begs the group to run, clinging to a fragile hope that they can still make it out alive. But her voice dies as a glowing magical ward seals the massive double doors. The arena is locked. They are trapped in a slaughterhouse. The blue-haired mage violently shakes, whispering through tears as she asks if the Emperor silences her with a thunderous leap. A world-ending smash plummets straight toward the paralyzed spellcaster. Rooted in sheer panic, she shuts her eyes, but Takemichi rockets into the death zone, violently deflecting the titanic strike at the last possible millisecond. The girls gasp their eyes wide as they watch his battered back shield them from certain doom. He snarls a blood-soaked vow. Nobody else dies today. He pledges to hold the line, even if he has to burn his own soul to ashes. The boss relentlessly hammers down with earth-shattering blows, driving Takemichi backwards step by grueling step. Sliding across the cracked floor, the rogue violently corrects his posture. Instead of crumbling under the pressure, he weaponizes his backward slide, ricocheting off the debris to slingshot right back into the danger zone. His razor-sharp edge finally bites into the tyrant's hide. Furious, the behemoth obliterates the floor, trying to squish the pest. Even the giant seems utterly baffled that this tiny human refuses to die. A monstrous fist craters the very spot where Takemichi stood a heartbeat ago. Dodging by a razor's edge, he grounds his boots. Crimson aura explodes from his core as he pushes his mangled muscles beyond their absolute breaking point. Surging into point-blank range, he buries a brutal uppercut slash straight into the Emperor's jaw. Watching from the sidelines, the girls are completely mind-blown. It finally clicks: Takemichi is literally going toe-to-toe with the raid boss, entirely solo. Despite the massive buffs from his death penalty, Takemichi is utterly horrified that the Titan can still rag. Despite his god-tier boosts, he is brutally batted away yet again. He grinds his teeth grimly, accepting that this nightmare is standard for a magic tower overlord. He brutally admits the truth. His raw numbers are just too garbage to win. The smug tyrant shifts tactics, coldly aiming to bleed out the human stamina. Takemichi just glares back with ice in his veins. If he has to die 1,000 brutal deaths to stack enough power to... The behemoth unleashes a chaotic hurricane of razor-sharp energy waves. Takemichi weaves through the lethal meat grinder, surviving purely on godlike reflexes and sheer desperation. Finding a microscopic blind spot, Takemichi brutally redirects the momentum and slices into the beast's armor. He erupts into a blinding flurry of point-blank slashes, carving up the monster's torso. But the Emperor snaps back, unleashing a devastating radial sweep. Sent flying through the air, his combo is violently cut short. Tumbling across the stone, a chilling thought hits him. His body is... Without skipping a beat, the Colossus floods the entire arena in an inescapable tsunami of lethal shockwaves. The blue-haired mage snaps her head up, a horrifying realization freezing her blood. A crescent wave of death is locked dead on her, and she can only draw a final, trembling breath. A cold system screen flashes: Takemichi is dead. A brutal penalty drops, but he just embraces it. This is exactly what he planned. Rather than draining his strength, the curse flips, flooding his veins with an explosive burst of agility. He drags himself back to his feet, eyes locked on the Ogre Emperor, fully prepared to die and revive. Watching from afar, the blonde girl gasps, finally grasping the horrifying reality of his infinite revival. She pieces it together: every single death triggers a chaotic backlash, a double-edged sword that could tear its user apart from the inside. Her breath catches as she wonders, can Takemichi really survive this agonizing loop without losing his mind? He charges straight back into the meat grind. Boom. Another inverted penalty hits, wrapping him in a thick... Not good enough, he mutters, discarding the buff. He throws himself into the slaughter over and over, soaking up pure agony until he rolls the exact stat he needs. The next twisted penalty floods him with a massive surge of health. Right then, Takemichi twists the system's curse into his own lethal weapon. He isn't just dying anymore. He's using every brutal slaughter as a whetstone to sharpen his eyes. Burning with a deranged, unyielding focus, he figures it out. This cursed cycle of slaughter is the exact key to annihilating his enemy. A wicked smirk creeps across his bloody face as the master plan locks into place. He plants his boots firmly on the ground after yet another respawn. The panic is gone. Chest heaving, he swiftly scans his pulsing stats, calculating his new limits. The excruciating torment of dying on repeat is slowly fracturing his sanity, pushing, but he swallows the screams and forces the pain down. And then he feels it. The ultimate buff he's been bleeding for finally... A glowing system alert pops up in absolutely astronomical Takemichi grins, blood dripping from his chin. He just hit the ultimate jackpot. He lets that terrifying new strength settle into... Suddenly, a fresh blue window flickers to light. Thanks to his relentless abuse of infinite revival, the skill evolves, handing him the power to handpick his exact respawn coordinates. Show me the details, he demands instantly. Takemichi stares at the floating text in dead silence, piecing the puzzle together. Then it clicks. A dark, triumphant grin splits his face. He just found the cheat code to massacre the tower boss. Yoshito instantly recognizes just how broken this custom respawn feature truly is. He wastes zero time putting the glitch to work. As the system cues his next revival, he hones his absolute focus. He's transforming the very concept of dying into an offensive strike. Launching himself at the towering monster, he roars that he crawled back from the grave, specifically to tear it apart. The system clarifies the rules. He can now respawn anywhere within a 3-meter radius of his corpse. Yoshito gets it. This mechanic is a fail-safe, designed to stop users from getting stuck in endless spawn-camping meat grinders. He shudders, remembering how reviving right where he dropped used to leave him as a sitting duck for a back-to-back execution. Without that spatial shift, a single bad death meant infinite suffering. But now, with total control over his return coordinates, he can shatter the loop entirely. He is officially weaponizing his own slaughter. Turning armed with this game-breaking knowledge, he stares down the colossal boss inside the crumbling ruins. From the sidelines, his party holds their breath as he calculates the geometry of the battlefield. He angles his body with chilling, calculated precision. Yoshito does the math out in the open. This respawn radius lets him literally teleport straight into a monster's blind spot. Strategy locked, he hurls himself into the fray. He whispers a cold promise to himself. This round is his, and he only came back to execute the beast. In a flash of light, he materializes midair directly behind the behemoth's neck. He just turned a respawn into a devastating stealth ambush. His party members drop their jaws, completely baffled by his phantom-like movement. Yoshito realizes they think he just moved at light speed, totally blind. The colossal boss senses the killing intent, but it's way too late. Yoshito's blade viciously rips through the beast's flesh, before it can even twitch to defend itself. Hitting the ground cleanly, a dark thought crosses his mind. Even the most ruthless scumbags he crossed paths with didn't deserve the grotesque fates they met. But the gory memories of those victims don't shake him. They forge his willpower into steel. He braces his grip and charges forward. Deep down, he openly admits that nobody ever deserved. Honestly, the legendary loot waiting at the end of this raid means absolutely nothing compared to simply putting an end. Right now, the only thing he craves is the boss's head on a platter. Provoked and bleeding out, the furious monster wildly thrashes back with apocalyptic force. The beast finally zeroes in on the impending doom. Yoshito launches himself right through the opening he carved out. Pure murderous intent radiates from him as he commits to the lethal strike. The Titan can only gawk in sheer terror, watching the blade descend. A devastating sweep tears right through the monstrosity, sealing its fate. Every ounce of the creature's primal rage evaporates. Its colossal frame plummets to the earth, permanently grounded. Yoshito looms over the shattered carcass, breathing heavily in the newfound silence. A digital prompt blinks, verifying he crushed the overlord of instantly depositing a rare artifact and a glowing mana crystal into his stash. Though a heavy, lingering dread muddies his triumph. Before he can spiral, the blue-haired girl sprints over, practically sobbing with relief. She throws her arms around him, confessing she was absolutely petrified he wouldn't make it. A second later, the reality of her tight grip sinks in. Blushing furiously, she stammers out a frantic apology and steps back. Beside her, the blonde mage offers a deep, genuine nod of gratitude for their survival. She openly admits she and Yuri would be corpses without his intervention. However, she absolutely refuses to excuse his suicidal combat tactics. Witnessing him willingly dive into the meat grinder over and over shredded her nerves. The gruesome phantom of his endless deaths still hangs thick in the heavy atmosphere. She admits straight up that watching him get slaughtered was pure torture. Despite saying sorry for lecturing her savior, her trembling voice betrays just how deeply the trauma scarred her. Yoshito waves it off with a soft, reassuring gaze. Rather than defending himself, he says he is sorry for putting them through that bloody spectacle. He explains that no matter how many times he bites the dust, he will constantly revive. Then he drops a raw confession he usually keeps buried. Beneath his fearless facade, he admits the process is absolute agony every single round. He blurts out that getting killed hurts like absolute hell. The blonde just nods awkwardly, trapped between pity and sheer disbelief. Swearing to do better, Yoshito promises he will try his absolute hardest to stay alive from now on. He flashes a goofy, apologetic grin, desperately trying to lighten the mood. The goofy vow works, and the suffocating tension finally bleeds out of the girl's shoulders. A sudden digital chime shatters the quiet relief. The interface broadcasts that Hermes will self-destruct in 10 seconds, initiating an emergency forced eviction for all survivors. Yuri realizes this makes sense, remembering that conquered magic spires always dissolve once their master dies. The blonde promises Yoshito they will regroup outside after the warp. He watches their bodies turn translucent, the sudden isolation creeping in. Now standing in total solitude, his eyes drift to the mangled corpses scattered across the arena. The massive pools of crimson serve as a brutal reminder of the blood paid for this win. He silently swears to carry their memories forward. With a final glance, a blinding flash of teleportation magic engulfs him. Back in the real world, the colossal monument of Hermes begins fracturing. Looming over the skyline, the gargantuan outer shell shatters into billions of glowing pixels. The entire cursed monolith cascades downward, raining away as harmless digital snow. Miles away, government executives panic over Hermes being cleared so quickly. They stammer that the raid was not even projected to reach the midway point yet. A sweating junior analyst verifies the spire is actually gone, promising a detailed debriefing immediately. The regional director scrutinizes the flashing monitors, without saying. Instead of panicking, a wicked smirk crawls across her face at this chaotic twist. Simultaneously, Yoshito gets violently spat back out into reality. He hits the pavement hard, right in the middle of a busy plaza, instantly drawing bewildered stares from dozens of lingering hunters. Other surviving players materialize in heaps all around him, while the spectral remains of Hermes evaporate in the clouds. A collective gasp ripples through the onlookers as they realize the impossible raid is actually. Yoshito gazes at the sky, his brain slowly catching up to his monumental achievement. He stares down at his trembling palms, checking if he is still in one piece. Gripping his fingers tight, the raw weight of his triumph finally anchors him to the present. It finally clicks, he genuinely beat the unbeatable spire. A breathless, giddy grin slices right through his bone-deep fatigue. The adrenaline rush fades into a profound, quiet pride. He quickly forces his face neutral, holding back an outright cheer. All around him, frantic whispers explode as the news of the boss's slaughter goes viral. Crowds lose their minds that a player blitzed a dungeon they were locked out of. Wild rumors immediately ignite over what kind of absolute freak of nature pulled this off. In his mind's eye, Yoshito pictures himself striking a triumphant pose and declaring his grand victory to the world. But the bitter reality quickly sinks in. He realizes that if the ground wasn't stained with the blood of fallen challengers. Still shattering his very first magic tower pumps a massive surge of adrenaline and raw confidence straight through his veins. Shaking his head, he forcefully grounds himself before his ego inflates too much. But then a sudden realization hits him, like he needs to stay completely off the radar. Being outed as the lone wolf who slaughtered the final boss would slap a giant neon target right on his back. His master plan. Melt into the background and vanish into thin air before anyone can put. Sadly, that brilliant strategy crumbles into dust the very next second when the two girls lock eyes with him and shout his name for everyone to. Bouncing on her heels, the blonde practically shrieks with excitement, demanding to know exactly what god-tier loot. The word boss echoes through the crowd. Instantly, dozens of battered challengers snap their necks in his direction. Their whispers spread like wildfire as the survivors start piecing it together. Could this guy really be the one who... The absolute shock hits the crowd hard, especially since they recognize him as the exact same laughingstock they publicly roasted for wasting cash on that supposedly... Now that pathetic underdog is standing tall as the undisputed conqueror of the tower. Feeling the heavy weight of their stares, Yoshito desperately dodges the spotlight by bolting over to a rusty vending machine to grab a soda. He scurries off into a quiet corner, cracking open the freezing can. While his 2 feet finally escaping the suffocating mob, he lets out a massive, heavy sigh. He mutters under his breath, annoyed that the crowd was treating him like some kind of circus freak. Looking a bit guilty, the blonde rubs the back of her neck and apologizes for putting him on full blast like that. But Yuri quickly chimes in, reminding him that the second he annihilated, becoming the absolute center of attention was 100% guaranteed. Yoshito quietly rolls that heavy, intimidating new title around in his head. It feels incredibly surreal. Just hours ago, he was nothing but a bottom-tier scrub, and now people are staring at him like he is an absolute legend. Looking back at the nightmare he just survived, he finally accepts that gambling everything on that infinite revival skill stone was the smartest move he ever made. Breaking the silence. Yuri shifts nervously, carefully, steering. She questions him about the dreaded death penalty. By all known logic, dying should have permanently shattered his stats, shaving off a brutal 40 points of strength every single time. Her mind is completely blown trying to figure out how he spammed infinite revival so flawlessly, without turning into a totally powerless husk. Yoshito freezes totally, at a loss for words. Breaking down his hidden inversion ability to them would be a massive headache, even more complicated than explaining the resurrection itself. He racks his brain utterly clueless on how to even start unraveling that insane mechanic. Picking up on his tense silence, Yuri waves her hands frantically, promising she isn't trying to interrogate him. It was just pure harmless curiosity. Her gentle backpedaling loosens the tight knot in his chest, though he still keeps sensing the heavy mood. The blonde leaps in to rescue the vibe, completely tossing that heavy topic out the window. Her eyes practically sparkle with greed as she loops back to her favorite subject. Leaning in close, she begs him to reveal the ultra-rare loot dropped by the clearly proving that shiny treasures matter way more to her than his dark, mysterious secret. Shrugging, Yoshito attempts to boot up his status window to give them a peek. But he blinks in shock when the holographic interface straight up refuses to materialize. It clicks in his brain instantly. Out here in the real world, the system plays by a completely different set of rules. He explains to the girls that the interface is strictly locked to the inside of the magic towers. In the same vein, superhuman stats and flashy abilities are entirely disabled out on the streets. It is a built-in safety net, designed to stop awakened challengers from turning society into an absolute war zone. But he smirks, noting there is one major loophole to that rule. If you stand directly on the lingering footprint of a conquered tower, the lingering magic allows challengers to flex their powers in the real world. To back up his claim, he thrusts his hand straight into the invisible, shimmering energy field that still heavily blankets the crater where the monolith used. A familiar chill shoots up his arm as the system instantly reboots. The heavy, suffocating aura of the dungeon comes crashing back down on them, and Yuri shivers, muttering that the creepy vibe still gives her goosebumps. But safely inside that magical zone, Yoshito flicks his wrist, and the blue screen flawlessly snaps to life. The two girls immediately press in close, practically vibrating with hype to see his grand prize. The glowing text reveals an exclusive, one-of-a-kind relic named False Animos. Yoshito taps the icon to pull it from his inventory. Instantly, a blinding flash of azure light explodes outward, forging the mythical artifact right in thin air. Yoshito's jaw practically drops as the swirling energy binds together. The brilliant glow hardens into cold, lethal steel right in his palm. He gasps, realizing the ultimate reward isn't just a generic piece of armor, but a master-crafted, unique blade. Gazing at the weapon, Yuri nods in absolute awe, confirming that this masterpiece is the legend. The system softly hums, permanently burning the name False Animos into his, giving the hilt a swift, experimental swing. Yoshito grins as the blade slices effortlessly through the air, with perfect, feather-light balance. Total domination. The girls stare at him, a whirlwind of absolute awe and unspoken feelings swirling in their eyes. Suddenly, a brilliant idea sparks in the blonde's mind. Catching that mischievous glint, Yuri instantly tenses up. Without missing a beat, the blonde pitches a wild idea next time the three of them need to team up. Yuri could not agree faster, eagerly blurting out that she is entirely on board with that plan. The timid girl attempts to chime in, but she locks up so completely that her teammates can only exchange uncomfortable, worried glances. Stepping in, our hero smoothly pivots her away from the agonizing awkwardness, while the blonde cheerleader excitedly roots for her to speak up. Blushing furiously and second-guessing her every move, the poor girl is practically paralyzed by the sheer pressure of the moment. Taking a breath, he opts for a gentler nudge. He softly reminds her that best friends do this all the time, completely melting away her invisible walls. That tiny step forward feels like an absolute triumph. The two girls immediately cheer, hyped that they finally cracked her shell. Riding that high, the blonde pivots straight to the boy, hungry for their next big mission. Refusing to hit the brakes, she demands they tackle a magic tower even deadlier than Hermes. Her fiery ambition skyrockets, setting her sights on a mind-blowing, colossal scale. Brushing off the nervous stammers beside her, she fearlessly announces their next prey. Zeus. He chews on the thought, the girls holding their breath for his verdict. But the room drops into dead silence when he completely flips the script. Stepping out of Hermes, he casually drops a bomb. He has an urgent detour in mind. Fidgeting, the timid girl stutters out a question about their destination. He fires back without blinking. Forget exploring another dungeon. He is heading straight to the Tokyo Challenger Management Bureau. The girls just blink, scrambling to figure out why he is trading a monster-infested labyrinth for a boring government desk. Their brains short-circuit further as it sinks in that he is entirely serious about ditching the towers. He breaks it down: the Bureau actually pays top dollar for magic stones and gear, unlike those. His ultimate master plan. liquidating all their hard-earned loot into cold hard cash at lightning speed. And his reasoning hits painfully close to home. Purchasing that infinite revival ability drained his bank account to absolute zero. The hype instantly evaporates, leaving the girls staring at him like he grew a second head. For some quick context, the Tokyo Challenger Management Bureau is a massive state-run powerhouse built from the ground up to back up adventurers. They feed hunters real-time intel on the towers and buy up stones and weapons at insanely competitive market rates. Compared to those shady alleyway vendors who love fleecing rookies, the Bureau has built a bulletproof reputation by keeping everything strictly above board. Since it sits right on the dungeon's doorstep and enforces zero power level caps, it attracts absolute heavyweights. And since Hermes coughed up both rare artifacts and glowing magic stones, our guy is banking on a massive payday. Watching a fellow hunter walk away with fat stacks of cash, his eyes gleam with the hope of finally escaping poverty. Stepping up to the glass, he tells the clerk he is ready to cash in his monster loot. But right as he opens his inventory, it hits him. He never actually counted his haul. Jaws hit the floor as a literal mountain of glittering gems erupts all over the pristine counter. The panicked receptionist scrambles to catch the avalanche of treasure before it completely floods the lobby. Even he is left utterly speechless, realizing just how wildly lucrative conquering Hermes actually was. Shaking off the shock, the clerk gets back to business and tallies up the fortune, though her eyes are practically sparkling at the unbelievable loot. As the bills are stacked up, he is practically vibrating out of his shoes at the thought. The second that thick wad of cash touches his palms, he feels like a billionaire kingpin. His mind instantly spirals into wildly irresponsible shopping sprees, sending massive red flags to the girls beside him. They exchange a sharp look, silently agreeing that this guy needs an intervention before he blows it all. Stepping up, the blonde fiercely lectures him about budgeting, terrified he will plummet right back into poverty. He grumbles in agreement, though his brain is still window shopping for luxury gear. But before the dust can settle, an unexpected voice slices through the air right behind him. The boy instantly realizes who it is. A deadly predator has finally tracked him down. A woman strides forward, claiming she caught wind of his arrival at the agency and had been hunting him. The sheer gravity of her presence suffocates the room before she even drops her name. The kid instantly knows this isn't some pencil-pushing bureaucrat. She introduces herself as Rito Fun. The head, without missing a beat, she calls him out as the brand new dominator of Hermes and demands a moment of his time. Hearing his own name slip from her lips, he realizes she's already dug up everything about him. Suddenly it clicks, he recognizes her face because she's an absolute legend, a high-profile VIP he's spotted around the agency before. Whispers call Rito an absolute beast. Among challengers hype, she didn't just get handed that title. She crushed 3 magical towers before the Bureau ever snapped her up. Her face is plastered on billboards all over the metropolis. She's practically a celebrity. Yet right now her piercing gaze is locked dead on him. Sweating bullets, he cautiously asks what the top brass could possibly want with a guy like him. She breaks it down with chilling accuracy. Priority number 1, a full-blown interrogation into the deadpan gravity in her voice instantly spikes his anxiety. Priority number 2, she wants a frontline look at what this new dominator can actually do. The writing is on the wall. This isn't a polite invitation, it's a trap. And he's walking right into an evaluation. Strolling down the hall, she recaps his official statement, how he got cornered and dragged kicking and screaming into the boss chamber, and casually notes that this intel needs to be blasted out to the rest of the challengers. She then throws him a bone, thanking him for shedding light on the grim fate of Nojishi and his squad. The agency, she assures him, will handle breaking the news to the grieving families. Her features harden as the chat shifts from cold paperwork to raw tragedy. Casualties in the towers are just a Tuesday, she claims, but the grit in her voice screams that sweeping it under the rug doesn't mean it doesn't sting. She marches forward, dragging him right into that heavy, suffocating reality. Without warning, she demands to know if watching them die ripped him apart, twisting the knife perfectly into his festering guilt. He opens his mouth, a weak trembling nod is all he can muster. Gory flashbacks crash over him, a brutal replay of just how utterly pathetic and powerless they were. He recalls the bitter pill they all swallowed, tricking themselves into believing resistance was completely futile. The gruesome snapshot of Nojishi's slaughter explodes in his mind, tearing open the heavy baggage he'd shoved down deep. Her blunt poke at his trauma hits like a freight train, because she just voiced the exact nightmare he couldn't put into words. He drops his gaze, staring at the floor while her imposing silhouette leaves him drowning in his own despair. She coldly muses that throwing up their hands and claiming it was unavoidable. The heavy silence shatters as they step into the agency's combat arena. She strides in and nonchalantly preps the zone, leaving the rest creeping in behind her, completely clueless about the coming storm. Out of nowhere, a wooden blade sails directly at his head, snapping his reflexes into gear. As his fingers wrap around the hilt, she casually mentions it's just standard-issue agency gear. Then comes the order, use it. She locks into a combat stance, radiating an aura that screams the real exam has officially kicked off. Rido announces she's taking him on herself, eager to crack open a Dominator and see what makes him tick. She spins the brawl as official top brass business, not just some random power trip. He quickly figures out that backing down isn't on the menu, but probes for a way out regardless. From prompting a deadpan grumble about how easy it is to backseat drive a deathmatch. Letting out a heavy sigh, he steps up to the plate. If he's forced to throw hands with Tokyo's apex predator, he might as well go all in. Nods are exchanged and the arena plunges into a suffocating quiet. He silently repeats that, but hypes himself up with the fact that he just butchered a tower boss. He clings to the hope that this makes Rido gestures for him to strike first, handing over the opening play. The absolute second the match kicks off, she blurs out of existence. Less than a heartbeat later, she materializes right in his face, launching a blitz that completely shatters his perception of speed. Her opening combo blasts him off his feet, launching him into the air before he can even flinch. It hits him way too late. He completely misjudged her threat level. Riddle stays right on top of him, her movements brutally efficient. A merciless storm of strikes backs him into a corner, completely smothering him. Her speed isn't just fast, it's utterly suffocating. He desperately throws up his guard, barely deflecting blows that rain down from absolute blind spots. This isn't a duel anymore. It's a slaughter. She bulldozes him across the battlefield, stripping away every ounce of his control. Gritting his teeth, he scrambles to plant his feet. But Riddle shadows his every move, striking from above, lunging from behind, denying him even a single breath to recover. He spots the next blow swinging in, yet his body just can't react fast enough. The devastating impact violently craters the ground beneath his. Thrown backward, he crashes hard, lungs burning as he gasps for air. The terrifying truth dawns on him. Her raw strength completely dwarfs the boss he just slaughtered. He died and dragged himself back to fight Hermes countless times. But right now, all that bloody experience feels completely useless. The sheer gap in their skill is agonizing. After all, this is a monster who annihilated multiple towers without dropping a single life. That crushing realization hits him right in the... But then he snaps out of it. He reminds himself of who he is, the stubborn survivor who crawled through hell, no matter how many times his heart... He outright refuses to let his endless loop of deaths cheapen the pure agony he pushed through. This boiling rage inside him isn't just the fear of defeat. It's pure... Riddle, however, misreads his glare, assuming he's just throwing a tantrum over the massive canyon in their power levels. Playing defense is just a slow execution. If he wants to survive, he needs to weaponize the one insane advantage that normal fighters could never possess. Since the Grim Reaper doesn't scare him anymore, he can throw himself into suicidal attack angles that would terrify a sane person. Riddle sniffs out the shift in his aura the second he commits. Exploding forward, he screams out that it's finally his turn to hunt. For the very first time, a spark of genuine thrill sharpens Riddle's cold gaze. His completely unhinged aggression actually forces a split-second stutter in her flawless footwork. He locks onto that glitch instantly. Spotting the tiny window, he violently swings his blade while she's still off balance. Tearing right through his own physical limits, he cranks his speed into overdrive and violently shoves the strike home. Even he can't wrap his head around the fact that he just shattered her A deafening shockwave erupts between them as his weapon finally smashes into her ironclad guard. The vicious kickback rattles his own bones, but it proves she bleeds like anyone else. Cool as ice, Riddle openly admits she didn't see. She casually mentions that if he were fighting an average opponent, his fearless suicidal aggression would be an absolute nightmare to counter. But then she breaks it down, that microscopic flinch he showed a second ago. That was the only reason she steamrolled him so effortlessly. If he had just thrown that punch without his gut pulling him back, this brawl wouldn't have been a one-sided beatdown, she notes. Yet even mid-sentence she glides forward, with a flick of her wrist, she effortlessly deflects his kinetic energy, instantly hijacking the rhythm of the fight. That's when she drops the bomb. He was dead wrong to ever think she left herself wide open. His fist locked up in midair, because his primal survival instincts smelled the lethal trap. way before his brain caught up. She shuts down any idea that he was showing mercy. No, his sudden freeze was raw proof that his body recognized the monster standing in front of him. Because her martial arts flow from a realm completely beyond his comprehension, his gut ripped the emergency brake. The kid fires back, claiming he was rolling the dice as well. And then he puts his cards straight on the table. His cheat code, Infinite Revival. A glitch that lets him crawl out of the grave, which means he can afford to play the game with insanely. Fired up by his own twisted reality, he hurls himself straight back into the meat grinder, completely discarding whatever breaks he had left. He spits out the truth. Without a broken skill like this, no average Joe. Riddle's face instantly hardens, visibly disgusted by how casually he trashes the value of normal people. She quietly repeats his exact words, letting the concept roll off her tongue, before violently rejecting the mindset. Trading bone-crushing blows, she casually drops that she's already dug through the top-secret files on his Infinite Revival. She fully gets the gimmick that death is just a reset button for him. But more crucially, she realizes this cheat code surgically removes the primal fear that paralyzes every other. That dark epiphany completely shifts the way she stares at him. Realizing she finally sees the true monster hiding inside him, a wicked grin slashes across his face. And for the first time, she openly respects just how absolutely horrifying his existence really is. Even so, she doesn't flinch. Pivoting perfectly, she whips a sickeningly clean counterstrike that violently snaps his jaw to the side. The brutal strike sends him staggering back. It's a harsh wake-up call. Her respect definitely doesn't mean she'll go easy on him. Rido's voice is ice-cold as she warns him. There's no way he's catching her slipping a second time. He swallows the agonizing pain with a sharp grimace, but the impact only fuels his fire. His gaze narrows instantly, hunting. Meanwhile, Rido barely breaks a sweat. She tracks his every move with an unreadable, piercing glare as their brutal close-quarters brawl rages on. He circles to her blind spot, launching a desperate sneak attack, but she doesn't even flinch. She's practically waiting for him to strike. Yoshito shrugs off his bleeding wounds. To him, a little agony is absolutely nothing compared to ending up in a body bag. The bureau chief stands in dead silence, sizing up her opponent after their explosive clash. A faint, knowing smirk tugs at her lips. She openly admits she finally grasps the terrifying depths of his power. And surprisingly, she's actually ready to throw in the towel. But just before she can make her surrender official, Yoshito abruptly drops backward like a puppet with its strings cut. Even the unflappable chief is totally blindsided by his sudden crash. Wheezing out his words, Yoshito desperately tries to lay out his priorities. He makes it painfully clear. Taking the win means absolutely nothing if he doesn't get a medic right this second. His squad scrambles to his side in pure panic as his health takes a wildly terrifying nosedive. They frantically shove his dislocated tongue back into place, desperately trying to keep him breathing. Once he finally props himself up, Yoshito is visibly trembling, realizing he was just millimeters from the grave. The chief coldly shrugs it off, reminding him that he's still breathing. But Yoshito fires back, annoyed that she is completely missing the big picture. Desperate to wrap things up, he figures their little deathmatch settled the score and asks to hit the road. She shuts him down immediately. The actual reason she pushed him to the brink speaking as the head of the management bureau, she declares that his raw power blows any standard challenger right out of the water. Because of that jaw-dropping display, she formally hands over an exclusive mission straight to Yoshida Takamichi. The rest of the crew stands there, completely stunned. Everybody knows a personal bounty from the bureau chief guarantees a life-changing. She instantly sweetens the pot, promising the reward will be paid out in hard cash, an amount guaranteed to make his jaw drop. The mere mention of money hooks his attention in a heartbeat. Tossing his objections out the window, he eagerly demands the full breakdown of. She lays it all out. Just a few hours ago, the Bureau picked up the sudden manifestation of a brand new ominous tower. The entrance is already locked down under strict emergency protocols. Her offer sounds incredibly simple on paper, but sneak inside the tower and pull out whatever intel he can find. The target in question, a nightmarish stronghold known as the Mage Tower. She stares him dead in the eye, stressing that he is the only living soul capable of pulling this off. She repeats it just to let the weight sink in. When it comes to the first scouting run into Persephone, there is no. Yoshito narrows his eyes, demanding to know why the Bureau isn't handling this mess themselves like they usually do. The chief drops a bombshell. They did send their own people in. 2 fully geared squads, 10 elite fighters, and absolutely 0 survivors. Gasps ripple through the room as the onlookers grapple with the fact that an entire strike team was wiped off the map. The chief sighs, admitting she thought the initial report was a sick joke. But the cleanup crew confirmed the absolute worst: every single challenger was a corpse. The grisly scene painted a picture of pure panic. The bodies were piled up right by the exit, frozen in a desperate scramble to escape collapsing mere inches from salvation. Yoshito instantly spots the glaring flaw in that story. The entrance is a designated safe zone. Beasts physically cannot spawn there. So what the hell killed them, he asks. The chief's expression darkens as she reveals the wildest part. Not a single body had a scratch, bite, or claw mark on it. Whatever slaughtered 10 seasoned veterans left absolutely no trace. Realizing this was a suicide mission, she instantly aborted the operation, ordering the cleanup crew to grab the bodies and pull out immediately. Yet despite securing the remains, the brass is still flying blind. No timeline, no location, no murder weapon. That terrifying bloody question mark is all they know about the Persephone Tower. The gears turn in Yoshito's head, and it clicks. She needs him specifically because his infinite respawn cheat makes him the perfect guinea pig to tank whatever invisible force butcher. She quickly throws up her hands, swearing she isn't treating him like cannon fodder, and has 0 intention of throwing his life away. However, the brutal reality is that she refuses to bury any more of her agents. She leans in, practically begging him to take the job. Stripping away her cold professional armor, she looks him dead in the eye and asks him to do it just for her. That raw, vulnerable plea completely catches him off guard. He freezes, violently torn between his own paranoia and the crushing gravity of her desperate. Fast forward a bit, and our boy steps straight into the belly of the beast, ready to crack the Persephone mystery. He touches down in the first-floor sanctuary, booting up his spatial awareness. But the suffocating graveyard silence instantly sets his teeth on edge, long before a single threat even shows its ugly face. Out of nowhere, a crushing migraine spikes through his skull, a blaring alarm that this place is already messing with him. He flips the switch, locking in, swearing to unmask whatever phantom executioner wiped out the last crew before things go south. Flashes of his friends' terrified faces fuel his fire, cementing his refusal to bite the dust here. He pulls up his interface, gearing up to plunge headfirst into the abyss. With the weight of their expectations riding on his shoulders, he goes all in, summoning Phos Aminos directly to his hands. It is a spectacular, one-of-a-kind blade, tailor-made for slice. Pushing forward, twisted silhouettes ripple through the dense smog. The vanguard finally drops the cloak, a squad of weapon-wielding bone rattlers, marching out of the shadows. But Yoshito does not wait around. He strikes first, carving a violent path right through the rushing undead horde before they can even box him in. The brittle skeletons shatter, instantly pulverized by his explosive opening barrage. He shreds the entire mob into bone dust with one breath. Smirking, he feels the perfect balance of the blade, feather light, razor sharp, and absolutely living up to that elite, unique tier hype. With the warm-up out of the way, he pivots to hunt down the tower's true anomaly. Suddenly, the atmospheric pressure violently drops, making his stomach churn as he realizes the real apex predator has arrived. Sickly violet vapor violently swirls into grotesque, unnatural tendrils, dragging his gaze upward. He scrambles back, desperately dodging, as the sinister haze attempts to swallow him whole, knowing damn well that touching that stuff means game over. He spits a curse and violently swats the smoke away. But as he backpedals, a blaring scarlet system prompt flat out confirming the vapor has already infected his system. His eyes lock onto the glowing text, and the sheer horror of the situation instantly clicks. This is it. This is the invisible Grim Reaper that slaughtered those 10 agents. The interface mercilessly spells it out. He has been branded with the dreaded Curse of Persephone, and his heart will permanently stop beating in exactly 120 seconds. Yoshito stares in disbelief. This is a fatal status effect that triggers just by laying eyes on that toxic purple smog. The chief's gamble was spot on. Only an immortal like him could even survive long enough to figure this out. The blazing countdown timer pulses aggressively in his face, completely erasing. He shudders, imagining how a normal hunter would absolutely lose their mind the second that death mark popped up. But then a golden rule of tower diving flashes through his brain. Stepping back into the real world instantly cleanses all status effects, wiping out every buff and curse alike. The puzzle pieces slam together. That is exactly why those two strike teams hauled ass back to the front door after catching the infection. They made it all the way back to the sanctuary, but the timer hit 0 a fraction of a second before they could cross the threshold. The haunting mystery of those perfectly pristine corpses finally makes total sense. They were assassinated from the inside by the system itself. Suddenly the violet haze violently erupts, proving this predatory entity is still completely obsessed with taking him down. Instead of just floating aimlessly, the vapor slithers with deliberate, malicious intent. Yoshito locks his eyes on its shifting, choosing to dissect its hunting behavior, rather than just turning his back and running like a coward. He figures out the mist's game. Once it locks onto a target, it just fades away. Instead of shaking in his boots, he smirks, treating this lethal hex like a mere dare, refusing to let some misty parlor trick intimidate him. With the clock ticking down to 0, he goes all in, betting his infinite revival will flip into his ultimate trump card. The countdown hits 0, and the system cold-heartedly announces his impending doom. But instead of biting the dust, the status effect violently backfires, knitting his flesh back together and leaving him completely refreshed. He chuckles silently, praising his broken skill for clutching up again. Glowing with renewed vitality, he spots the ominous haze slinking away. With the immediate threat neutralized, he tracks its ghostly trail, betting his life it will drag him straight to the puppet master. He barely hesitates before plunging deeper into the tower's shadowy abyss. Ahead of him, the vapor thickens into a suffocating wall, a dead giveaway that this phantom sickness stems from something entirely physical. It hits him. Any average dungeon runner would be completely wiped out here, without a hard counter to this toxicity. The smog turns soupy, practically screaming that the boss is right around the corner. He steps out into a sprawling, cavernous hall where the swirling vapors spiral around an eerie, bubbling fountain. He narrows his eyes, immediately pinning the tainted pool as the heart of the plague. But before he can even draw his weapon, a suffocating, murderous aura materializes right beside the water. A vicious energy blast blindsides him, forcing him into a desperate roll. The explosive crater left behind proves he isn't dealing with mindless beasts. Something smart is defending this turf. A sinister, cloaked silhouette floats upward, instantly asserting dominance over the entire room. The system rings out, tagging the monstrosity as the cursed spring gatekeeper. Wasting 0 time, the boss unleashes a barrage of hovering, venomous orbs. Yoshito dances through the onslaught, weaving and dashing with razor-sharp precision, absolutely refusing to be cornered. Pissed off that its first strike missed, the creature ramps up the aggression. It roars, blasting out a shockwave of raw malice, hell-bent on crushing him under sheer murderous pressure. The Guardian rips a colossal tornado of dark mist straight from the waters, flinging it across the arena. Yoshito's eyes widen as he realizes the environment itself is being weaponized for maximum carnage. The pool reacts to its master, churning wildly like a living beast. The phantom cackles, smugly certain that if the magic doesn't shred him, the poison definitely will. Yoshito connects the dots. This cloaked freak is the mainframe, running the entire floor's deadly mechanism. Glaring at the relentless system alerts flashing before his eyes, he watches the monster's suffocating bloodlust physically manifest into infinitely stacking doom counters. Mid-thought, he is forced to parry a sudden wave of skeletal grunts bursting from the haze. He effortlessly slices one in half, but the tension in the room skyrockets. He realizes the boss is frantically spawning mob after mob, desperately trying to bleed out his stamina. Bone soldiers swarm him from every possible blind spot, attempting to crush him under sheer volume. Yoshito brutally parries and slashes through the meat grinder, yet the relentless tide eventually pins him on the back foot. A rusted blade manages to snake through his guard, slicing a nasty, jagged gash straight down his spine. He grits his teeth, grudgingly admitting that for the first time in ages, he's actually feeling the sting. He crumples hard onto the cold stone, splashing into a puddle completely battered and seemingly swarmed. The boss cackles triumphantly at its supposed victory. Yoshito just plays dead, baiting the arrogant phantom into dropping its guard. Then the magic happens. His cheat skill kicks in overdrive, snapping his bones as the lethal system notifications suddenly warp into massive health buffs. The enemy's own toxic energy is now hardwiring itself into Yoshito's veins, supercharging him instead of melting him away. A wicked grin crosses his face. This tower's executioner mechanic at all. For him, this deadly plague is basically an unlimited supply of premium health potions. Seizing the perfect opening, he explodes upward, driving his blade mercilessly straight up through the cloaked specter. When the blinding clash finally settles, even he is blown away by how brutally fast the tables just turned. With its master annihilated, the venomous miasma instantly evaporates, leaving the ancient sanctuary completely cleansed. Fast forward to the Bureau, Yoshito delivers the grim truth. The elite raiders and Persephone didn't die in combat. They were silently choked out by the hex. The commander shudders, of a phantom weapon that erases lives without making a single sound. Looking up, she nervously asks if he managed to dig up any real countermeasure. Yoshito just smirks, radiating pure confidence, and casually slaps the ultimate cure right onto her desk. The chief stares at the glowing artifact he smuggled out of the hellish dungeon. He breaks it down for her after completely obliterating the freak spawning from that toxic fountain. The waters cleared up and spat out this legendary loot. Right there in her hands rests Persephone's legendary holy water. This liquid completely wipes out the curse of Persephone, throwing up a temporary shield against any new hexes. Yoshito lays it all out. With enough of this holy water on hand, even average challengers can push forward without dropping dead. He does add a quick disclaimer though. He only mapped out the first 3 levels, but based on that intel he bets every single floor hides its own cursed spring, cleansing those tainted waters. That is the real trick to beating Persephone. His ultimate strategy is simple. You have to conquer the tower step by step, purifying every spring you find and hoarding the holy water it spits out. A faint, genuinely impressed smirk tugs at the chief's lips. She nods her thanks, announcing that since the red flags and survival tactics are officially on the table, they can finally unlock Persephone for the general public. She officially signs off on his mission, addressing him with full respect by his title, Dominator Takemichi Yoshito. He waits for his standard paycheck, but instead she reaches into her desk and slams a ridiculously massive brick of cash right in front of him. It is such an absurd mountain of money that even her icy composure cracks for a second. When she asks if he needs more, Yoshito totally panics, waving his hands and swearing it is way more than enough. His sudden shouting gets some weird looks from the office staff. But doing the mental math, adding this to his payout from Hermes, Yoshito suddenly realizes he is sitting on an absolutely sickening amount of wealth. The sheer weight of his new bank account leaves his head spinning. He has zero clue what to even buy. Fast forward a few days. He instantly wipes out the massive debt he took on for Infinite Revival. But even after nuking that financial nightmare, his pockets are still stuffed with leftover reward money. So he struts right into a high-end designer boutique and steps back out wearing an outfit so incredibly tragic that random people on the street are openly laughing at his garbage taste. Yoshito is practically glowing, dripping in flashy, overly expensive, new money drip. He wants the whole world to know he is rich. Soaking in his own hype, he genuinely feels like he has stepped into a totally different elite tier of. But his little main character moment crashes when a familiar voice cuts through the crowd. Mana is buzzing with energy, telling Yuri that Persephone is finally open to everyone and begging to drag Yoshito along for the raid. Hearing his name drop, Yoshito freezes in absolute terror. He cannot let them see him dressed like a walking fashion disaster. While the girls gossip about how crucial holy water is for the new raid, Yoshito pulls his collar up, trying to ghost his way past them. He locks his knees, power walking as they brush right behind him. Once they are out of his peripheral vision, he lets out a massive breath, thinking he pulled off the ultimate stealth mission. But Mana's radar pings. She whips around. Yoshito scrambles to hide his face before she locks on. Too late. Mana leans way into his personal space, squinting to inspect the weird guy in front of her. Her jaw practically hits the floor when she realizes the moment she says his name, Yoshito flinches hard like he is radioactive, which instantly pisses Mana off because she thinks he is disgusted by her. Cornered and sweating, Yoshito blurts out his confession. He got filthy rich overnight and just panic bought whatever looked expensive. Yuri tries to do damage control, nervously whispering that he looks kind of cool. But Mana snaps that the pity compliment just makes it 10 times sadder. Waving off his eye-bleeding wardrobe for now, Mana leaves Yoshito nursing his bruised ego. She immediately pivots back to business, demanding he join their squad to conquer Persephone. Yoshito looks at her like she is crazy, asking why she is so desperate to rush into a literal death trap. Mana's eyes turn into dollar signs. Magic stones warped by the cursed fog are selling for absolute fortunes on the black market, and top-tier hunters are swarming the place. Yuri chimes in, noting that according to the guild's official tracker, teams have already smashed through the 10th floor in just a few days. It is a suspiciously fast clear rate. But Mana keeps it brutally honest. The real reason she is fired up. She is deeply jealous that Yoshito got rich and she plans to use him as her personal loot carry. Yuri, blushing furiously, quietly admits she would brave any terrifying dungeon as long as she gets to fight by Yoshito's side. Running the risk assessment in his head, Yoshito figures that as long as they stockpile enough holy water, they can actually cheat death. Hearing his green light, Mana and Yuri light up, totally hyped to kick down the doors of Persephone. But right as they are about to march out, Yoshito stops dead in his tracks, clearly bothered by one last detail. With a heavy sigh, he mumbles that he really needs to go home and change out of this clown suit before they step foot inside the tower. The atmosphere plunges into pure dread as a panicked adventurer bleeds out on the cold stone of a shadowy cathedral-style chamber. A glass flask of holy water rolls away from their lifeless fingers. The tower's true, brutal nature is finally unmasked. A towering spectral executioner looms over a slaughterhouse. The beast catches a scent, snapping its attention toward the sound of fresh prey. Its tattered cowl shifts back, exposing a skeletal visage radiating pure toxic purple. Welcome to the grim reality of floor number 10 inside the Persephone Magic Tower. An undead warrior charges forward, only to be obliterated by a blinding flash of steel. Yoshito materializes right behind the crumbling shower of bone fragments. He dismantled the threat without breaking a single sweat. His icy stare proves he absolutely dictates the tempo of this battlefield. He annihilates the monster with a flurry of crimson slashes, shredding it to dust. As the debris clears, Yoshito Takemichi stands victorious. Hitting level 16, he packs significantly more punch than before. Mana cheers his rapid progress, while Yuri gazes on in pure awe. Yoshito brushes the praise off, stating that butchering endless swarms of beasts naturally boosted his rank. In his own mind, though, he knows this tiny bump does absolutely nothing for his actual baseline power. Still, he has to maintain a decent, visible rank, so the others don't get suspicious about his true abilities. He figures grinding a bit more wouldn't hurt, right until the screen flashes a dire warning. Persephone's holy water buff expires in exactly 60 seconds. Yuri quickly catches on that their anti-curse shield is ticking rapidly down to 0. Since they already cleansed the local fountain, the toxic atmosphere shouldn't inherently harm them. Regardless, Mana urges Yoshito to drink another dose, just in case. Visibly distressed by the idea, he averts his eyes, hiding a deep knot of anxiety. Yoshito realizes a terrifying truth. If his unique inversion skill twists the holy water's effect, drinking it could instantly rot him from the inside. The grim thought, guilt gnaws at him for keeping his inverted powers a secret, and he swears to finally come clean as soon as they get a breather. Before the words leave his mouth, a chilling, killing intent spikes. He screams a warning just as the spectral executioner plummets from the ceiling, dead set on his allies. Yoshito roars their names, but the shadow is already striking. Every single one of them reacts a split second too late. The monstrosity bridges the gap. Mana shrieks in terror as the beast zeroes in on Yuri. In the frantic scramble, a precious bottle of holy water clatters uselessly across the stone. Crashing down right between the trio, the beast shatters their formation. It snatches Yuri up, locking her in a suffocating grip while hoisting its massive scythe high. Yuri thrashes wildly as a sickening violet mist swallows her whole. Yoshito instantly recognizes that the toxic haze is the actual weapon here. The life drains from Yuri's eyes, replaced by a hollow stare. As the dark magic, a bloody red system prompt validates their absolute worst. Persephone's lethal hex has successfully latched onto its target. Total system shutdown and death in exactly 120 seconds. She stares in sheer, unadulterated panic, fully grasping that she's on a tick. Yoshito connects the dots. This specific ghoul possesses the terrifying ability to instantly infect players with the hex. The timing is an absolute nightmare. It ambushed them the precise millisecond they're divine. To make matters worse, with her arms pinned in a vice grip, Yuri has zero way to drink a cure on her own. "I'm coming," Mana roars, lunging recklessly at the beast. The phantom executioner welcomes her advance with a savage whirlwind. Gritting her teeth, Mana bulldozes straight through the deadly steel storm, backing the monster up. Suddenly, a shockwave of violet energy almost blows her entirely off her feet. Recovering mid-air, she retaliates with a crushing overhead slam. Trapped in the brutal crossfire, Yuri helplessly sobs her best friend's name. A brutal counterswing sends Mana skidding backward across the floor. Yet she still frantically barks at Yoshito to stay out of the blast radius. Ignoring her command entirely, Yoshito shifts into high gear, and rockets directly at the abomination. He collides with the phantom in a massive head-on clash. The sheer impact forces the beast onto the defensive. Blood-boiling Yoshito winds up for a devastating combo, unleashing an absolute torrential downpour of crimson blades. Miraculously, the monstrosity tanks the entire. As the dust clears, the cloak shreds away to expose an even more terrifying demonic anatomy beneath. It proves that, despite Yoshito's savage onslaught, this boss fight has only just begun. The behemoth effortlessly soaks up every single hit. Yoshito grits his teeth, realizing his furious strikes are not even scratching the surface. A chilling realization washes over him. This thing is far from your average dungeon mob. As Mana and Yoshito scramble to find a better angle, the towering Reaper keeps Yoshito's mind races, desperately trying to decode the bizarre battle strategy of this creature. With that kind of raw power, it could crush them instantly. Yet it is practically turtling up instead of going for the kill. "We are on the clock here," Mana barks. She frantically gestures to Yuri, warning him that they have less than 90 seconds before that nasty curse snuffs out her life. "Please, let me go," Yuri sobs, but her pleas fall on deaf ears. The monstrous Reaper just looms over her trembling frame, drinking in her sheer terror instead of ending it quickly. A guttural, mocking laugh echoes through the chamber. It is absolutely relishing the despair. Suddenly, the air grows thick, utterly shattering the illusion that this is just some run-of-the-mill floor boss. The system window flashes red, revealing its true, terrifying name, Soul Expunger. In a flash of insight, the puzzle pieces click together. He quickly explains its twisted game. The Soul Expunger purposely waits out the holy water buff, unleashing its wrath only when its prey is completely vulnerable, just so it can gorge itself on their mounting panic. Boiling with absolute rage at the sick tactic, Yoshito refuses to be looked down on. "To hell with you!" he roars, launching himself directly at the abomination. This time, he throws his entire weight into a devastating strike that violently rattles the defense of the Reaper. A bone-chilling screech rips from the throat of the... Desperate to shatter the deadlock, Yoshito propels himself high into the air, vaulting straight over the monstrous Reaper and his captive team, lining up a devastating, plunging attack from a massive blind spot. "Wait, stop!" Mana screams, spotting the sudden, unnatural twitch of the creature. But barely a second later, her eyes go wide. "Never mind, go after it," she yells, changing her tune instantly. The Soul Expunger suddenly scurries away like a massive spike. Without missing a beat, Yoshito and Mana sprint after the fleeing monster. A sickening gut feeling hits them simultaneously. They are not just chasing this thing. They are being led right into a trap. That dreadful suspicion turns into absolute reality the moment they bust into a massive chamber, overflowing with an endless sea of rotting undead, all puppeted by the Soul Expunger. The horrific Reaper screeches a command, sending the skeletal hordes surging forward to crush them. Yoshito scoffs, fully realizing the boss. Well, the trap is sprung. Getting cold feet now? He playfully taunts Mana over the clattering of "Not a chance." Mana smirks, her knuckles turning white as she fiercely tightens her grip on her dual blade. Instead of falling back, she vaults like an absolute maniac, straight into the very heart of the bone-chilling swarm. A blinding flurry of neon blue slashes erupts, intimidated hardly. The overwhelming odds only fuel her adrenaline rush, leaving a wide sight. "Think you can keep this momentum going?" Yoshito calls out. "Watch me," she snaps back without a shred of hesitation. Moving in perfect sync, they unleash a blistering storm of synchronized strikes. Brilliant flashes of crimson and gold violently crisscross the battlefield, instantly vaporizing the skeletal. Realizing melee is not working, the surviving skeletal archers snap their bows to attention. A deadly, screeching volley of arrows completely blacks out the cavern ceiling. Caught off guard, Mana freezes as the lethal rain plummets straight, but in a red blur, Yoshito intercepts his blade, violently swiping every single projectile from the air before one can connect. Mana turns to check if he is hit, but his blazing eyes are already locked. With Yuri down to less than 60 seconds, playing it safe is no longer an option, and Yoshito knows it. Letting out a fierce roar, he explosively detonates his crimson aura, completely abandoning all defense. "I am blowing this whole damn place wide open," he screams, unleashing a gigantic, earth-shattering red shockwave that utterly annihilates the skeletal blockade, carving a brutal, bloody highway straight through the mob. As the dust settles, a faint glimmer from a fresh loot drop catches his eye. It turns out to be a mysterious, eerie ring. A quick glance at the system prompt reveals an absolutely cursed stat line. The item Corpse Grudge literally kills its wearer every 5 seconds. What kind of garbage developer makes this junk? Yoshito scoffs, feeling like the game is personally trolling him. But then a crazy realization, an item universally considered a literal death sentence by anyone else, might just be the ultimate cheat code he desperately needs right now. Without a second thought, he jams the cursed artifact onto his, fully confident that any other player would instantly drop dead, but he is built different. The dark metal bands physically material. A cold system voice rings out in his head, chillingly announcing his imminent execution in exactly 5 seconds. But thanks to the broken mechanics of inversion, that lethal doom effect completely flips again. Instead of dying, Yoshito will be blasted with a massive, full-body heal every 5. With infinite rapid-fire regeneration coursing through his veins, the need to block is throwing caution to the wind. Yoshito blitzes Soul Expunger at breakneck speed. His crimson shockwaves shred through the lingering skeleton horde. Treating the undead like mere dust, he pinpoints his strike and closes the gap on the Grim Reaper at the exact perfect moment. Hoisting his blade high, Yoshito vows to teach this abomination the true meaning of fear. He triggers the False Animal special attack skill. The opening blow of his 7-strike assault connects with a brutal crunch designed to exponentially amplify the damage with every single swing. Yoshito is acutely aware that breaking this chain triggers a massive cooldown penalty, so he locks in, dedicating his entire focus to Soul Expunger desperately drags Yuri forward as a human meat shield attempting to dodge the onslaught. The Reaper's scythe violently slices into Yoshito's flesh, yet the swordsman swallows the agony and pushes forward completely. Yuri screams in horror as she watches him sacrifice his own body to maintain the combo. Gritting his teeth, Yoshito channels the searing pain and keeps the lethal rhythm flowing. Suddenly, the cursed ring's inversion effect sparks to life, instantly patching up the gruesome wound he just sustained. Back at full health, he brings his sword crashing down with devastating momentum. A savage smirk crosses his face. He finally realizes the cheat code. He practically regenerates back to full health every 5 seconds. Panic flashes across Soul Expunger's hollow eyes for the very first time. Yoshito's relentless pressure snowballs into an overwhelming force, culminating in a blinding blue-white explosion that sends the Reaper skidding across the battlefield, shattering its grip on the fight. Surging toward the staggered abomination, a cold, confident smirk dances on Yoshito's lips. The tides of battle have officially turned. Out of nowhere, a stray skeleton ambushes him. The blade strikes deep and Yoshito collapses in a pool of his own blood. In the blink of an eye, the young warrior hits rock bottom, standing on the absolute brink of death, with zero time to spare. But right at death's door, the ring's paradoxical power flares up, completely rewriting his fatal destiny, cheating the Grim Reaper. Yoshito's body stitches itself back together. He lets out a bitter sigh, realizing this cursed jewelry just saved his skin once more. Back on his feet, he violently thrusts himself right back into the bloodbath. With Yuri still trapped in the crossfire, the nightmarish boss winds up to obliterate with one ultimate apocalyptic swing. Refusing to back down, Yoshito counters with a reckless do-or-die heavy strike. His rapid-fire combo erupts into an earth-shattering flash of radiant light. The undead behemoth finally crumbles under the sheer kinetic force, fracturing into. Consumed by the shockwave, the monster disintegrates into a pile of ruin. The immediate nightmare is finally over. Her adrenaline totally drained, Yuri's eyes roll back as she blacks out from sheer exhaustion. She plummets toward the hard stone. But Yoshito violently dashes forward and sweeps her into a tight embrace. Holding her, she groggily flutters her eyes open. The moment Yuri registers Yoshito cradling her, her hazy confusion morphs into pure, flushed panic. He offers a warm smile, whispering how deeply thankful he is that she made it out alive, prompting a bashful whisper of gratitude. However, their sweet moment is abruptly shattered by the grim reality that her deadly curse still lingers. The blonde mage forcefully barks at them, dragging the duo back to reality to confront the ticking time bomb. She quickly splashes blessed holy water over Yuri, temporarily freezing the dark magic in its tracks. She grimly points out that the boss maliciously synchronized its strike with the exact second the holy barrier was meant to expire. While they digest this horrifying truth, blood-red system notifications aggressively spam Yoshito's vision. He quickly pieces together that these terrifying pop-ups are bleeding out of the ring itself. Sweating bullets, he desperately scans the interface to figure out how long this bizarre loop will last. The cursed artifact, the corpse's grudge, literally inflicts instant death every 5 seconds while equipped. Before he can even process the horror, the gemstone violently splinters, morphing into a completely different state. Pitch black miasma explodes from the band, aggressively crawling up Yoshito's arm. He clenches his teeth, bracing for a gruesome betrayal from the parasitic loot. As the sinister shadows engulf his skin, he desperately prays it won't just blow him to smithereens. He furiously yanks at the jewelry, but the cursed metal refuses to budge. Suddenly it pulses with an eerie, blinding glow. Trapped, Yoshito simply rides out the terrifying surge of power, bracing for ultimate agony, until the searing pain abruptly vanishes into thin air, leaving him totally bewildered. A crisp system prompt chimes in, declaring the relic has hit its absolute maximum activation cap, forcefully evolving into a corroded ring. Glancing up, he warns the party that his risky drop item just mutated into something deeply bizarre. Unable to gauge if this is a massive buff or a lethal trap, he shrugs it off as relatively harmless since he isn't dropping dead anymore, and deliberately attempts to slide it off his finger. This time, the mutated band slips off like butter. With the sheer chaos finally put to bed, the battered squad takes a heavy breather to plot their next move. Yuri sheepishly bows her head, deeply apologizing for dragging everyone through this nightmarish hellscape. Scooping up the leftover mana crystals, the crew finally clears out. But the blonde spellcaster refuses to let Yuri drown in guilt, pivoting instantly to a fresh strategy. Fired up, Yuri vows to pull her own weight, committing hardcore to the crystal hunt. The squad dives right back into the dungeon, with Yuri throwing everything she has into the grind. Hours bleed by, and she is still pushing the pace, leaving her teammates completely wiped out. Day after day, the Persephone labyrinth gets systematically steamrolled, with rival squads smashing through the upper levels at lightning speed. By the end of the week, explosive rumors hit the streets. The Floor 30 boss chamber has officially been discovered. Cut to the Tokyo Hunters Guild, where Yoshito chills in the lobby. He sips his drink, mentally prepping for the upcoming rendezvous. Kicking back solo, his brain is already churning with strategies for that legendary 30th floor. Chatter echoes around him about the Persephone stronghold. Word on the street, the massive gates are locked tight, and absolutely nobody has cracked the code. His squad finally rolls up, apologizing for keeping him on standby. They lock in today's objective, infiltrating that exact boss room. But Yoshito immediately spots the glaring flaw. They still have zero clue how to bust open that barrier. Smirking, the blonde mage drops a bombshell. A contact of hers snagged a hidden clue near the summit. Yoshito gasps out loud, prompting her to violently shush him before anyone eavesdrops. Leaning in close, she whispers the intel, revealing a cryptic, bite-sized riddle. The puzzle demands the challenger prove their countless downfalls by presenting the symbol of rot. It also mentions some bizarre altar connected to the mystery. Yoshito scratches his head, totally clueless about what any of it means. The blonde caster is just as stumped. But right when it feels like a dead end, a light bulb goes off in Yuri's head. She mentions that tons of raiders inside Persephone have been looting rings cursed with a fatal debuff. Yoshito instantly freezes up, realizing he has that exact cursed band sitting in his inventory. The girls explain that the system strictly limits these drops to 1 per player. Top-tier raiders are already betting these are actually quest keys, not just trash gear. Yoshito connects the dots, remembering that despite wiping out endless mobs, he never looted a duplicate, practically confirming the theory. He pieces the riddle and the ring together, flashing back to the warning about pushing past the ultimate limit. His mind races back to his mutated accessory, and the cryptic line about holding up the symbol of rot. Yuri still buys into the skepticism. If the rings were the only answer, some random player would have cracked the vault by now. Bypassing any explanation, Yoshito jumps out of his seat, desperate to test his crazy hypothesis. He orders the squad to rally at Persephone right now. Sprinting to the zone, he figures out the missing piece. Only his uniquely evolved ring can shatter that seal. He pictures it as the ultimate master key, cementing his wild gamble. Upon hitting floor 30, the colossal dungeon gates leave Yuri utterly speechless, while Yoshito starts sweating bullets. If he miscalculated this, he is going to look like an absolute clown. He can already hear them roasting him alive for acting like some legendary lockpicker, and the cringe almost makes him abort the mission. Gulping down his pride, he marches toward the altar. Yuri questions why he is so stubbornly confident in a junk item. He confesses that after maxing out the lethal curse, the original ring literally mutated into something else. Yuri goes pale, totally shocked that he purposely tanked such a dangerous debuff. The only reason she doesn't lose her mind is because his insane respawn hack lets him walk away from such reckless stunts. Yoshito shrugs, admitting his reversal skill carried him through, though the evolved ring currently looks completely useless. Flashing its stats the display window is nothing but a blank, glitched-out mess. But that bizarre evolution is exactly why he is betting everything on it. To him, the riddle is obvious. Stacking enough fatal and slamming down this rotting artifact is the ultimate proof required to shatter the barrier. His massive brain play instantly leaves both girls staring in pure awe, turning his cheeks completely red from the sudden hype. On the inside, he is screaming, realizing he just hyped himself up so much that there is zero chance of backing out now. Still, he grips the band tightly, betting his entire reputation on this one hunch. It all comes down to this: either this artifact is the real key or they are totally screwed. Outside the boss chamber, the blonde mage finally gives up, after trying to brute force the massive gate, stepping aside for Yoshito. Raw power did not leave a single scratch. The ancient seal simply will not budge. Backed into a corner, Yoshito has no choice but to step up and put his crazy theory to the test. He swallows his nerves, anchoring his confidence in his own sharp instincts. Drawing a deep breath, he hoists the newly He orders the gate to unlock, presenting the glowing band as their ultimate master key. Dead silence follows. The agony of the quiet stretches on, as the heavy stone refuses to inch open. Doubt creeps in, making Yoshito sweat, wondering if he completely miscalculated. But then a blinding razor-sharp flash erupts from his hand. A web of crackling blue energy shoots from the metal webbing across the ancient stone. With a deafening groan, the colossal gates slowly grind up. The chamber is exposed. The girls stare in absolute shock, while Yoshito practically melts into a puddle of pure relief. But his victory is cut short. Reality violently snaps back. Breaching this gate means going toe-to-toe with the monster ruling the 30th floor. His relief instantly evaporates into dead serious focus, bracing for a nightmare far deadlier than Hermes. He mentally prepares for an absolute powerhouse, waving the girls over so they can cross the threshold as a team. But before they can even align, pure terror erupts from the darkness. A vicious shockwave of black magic blindsides Yoshito. The monstrous ruler explodes outward, ramming into him faster than anyone can blink. The sheer impact launches Yoshito through the air like a rag doll. He slams into the dirt with bone-crushing force, bleeding health points before the fight even officially kicks off. Gasping for air, he screams at the girls to stay back. They freeze in their tracks, totally bewildered. Behind the chaos, a glowing red mechanism groans to life, and the massive gates start sliding back into place. The chamber is locking them in. Yoshito immediately clocks the deadly trap. Peek and run is not an option here. He realizes the brutal truth: once you trigger this arena, nobody leaves until someone dies. A massive, swirling vortex of blue energy ignites around their enemy. Stepping out from the rift, a towering, skeletal figure, draped in the beast stalks forward, oozing absolute menace, looking like a dark priest, ready to lead a blood ritual. It stares down the trio in the sprawling arena. Yoshito and the girls draw their weapons, locking in for a brutal clash. The monster reveals its true form, an ancient, bone-armored cleric pulsing with freezing blue magic. It slams its heavy staff into the ground and starts chanting. Instantly, a shockwave of raw, sickening necromancy detonates above them, suffocating the air. Eerie blue flames swirl around the undead caster, shrieking like trapped souls. With one final guttural screech, the dark cleric finishes its deadly incantation. A tidal wave of dark energy rockets straight at the crew. Yoshito hoists his blade, accepting there is zero room to run. He cracked the seal, so he owns the consequences. He mentally vows to carry the absolute brunt of this bloodbath. The system flashes the enemy's tag, the Elder Bone Priest. No holding back. This is the true floor master. The sinister spell violently echoes as the ritual takes root. Rivers of spectral blue fire race across the stone tiles, infecting the entire arena with its corrupting aura. The squad suddenly realizes seconds too late that this is not just a basic blast attack. Jagged bones start snapping together straight out of the magical inferno. One by one, grotesque skeletal warriors claw their way up from the burning ashes. In seconds, an entire ravenous army of the walking dead circles their terrifying master. Yoshito's blood runs cold as the true nightmare clicks. This boss does not just hit hard, it can absolutely drown the battlefield. He knows he has to butcher this thing fast, or they will be swarmed alive. Without warning, the priest snipes a blazing red beam of death, forcing Yoshito to dive out of the crossfire, leaving the girls completely wide open. He violently carves a path through the skeletal meat, ignoring the annoying trash mobs to sprint straight for the puppet master. His strategy is simple: rip right through the center and obliterate the summoner in one god-tier strike. He violently bulldozes into the rotting front line, swinging with everything he has got, but mid-strike a chilling realization hits him. A newly spawned skeleton violently intercepts his charge at point-blank range, entirely cutting off his assault. The brutal impact sends a shockwave through the air, violently throwing Yoshito off balance. He hits the ground hard, spitting out a bitter curse as the grim truth dawns on him. These undead minions are forming an impenetrable, and before he can even scramble to his feet, the undead horde launches a synchronized ambush, their jagged blades slicing into his flesh from every angle, and sending crimson spraying across the stone floor. The sheer ferocity of the attack leaves him staggering. He is bleeding out, completely disoriented, and dangerously close to being swallowed alive by the mob. His vision blurs, and as he blinks back into focus, a circle of towering skeletons looms over him. A cold, glowing system prompt flashes before his eyes. Normally, the brutal death penalty would have shattered his defenses, but thanks to his capitalizing on the sudden surge of durability, he refuses to back down. Instead of retreating, he launches himself straight back into the meat grinder. Yoshito meets a skeletal broadsword head-on, the agonizing clash proving that these monsters possess terrifying raw strength. Despite his newly spiked stats, his muscles scream in agony, and the sheer physical toll of parrying their heavy blows violently shakes his entire frame. It hits him like a ton of bricks. These upper-floor abominations are leagues deadlier than the mindless trash mobs from the lower levels. Every single strike carries bone-crushing weight, and their lightning-fast reflexes relentlessly force Yoshito into a desperate retreating guard. A vicious downward slash nearly shatters his parry, a terrifying reminder that he is just one slip-up away from total annihilation. Taking down just one of these elite guards would be a nightmare. But an entire army? It is absolute suicide to fight them solo. Panic claws at his throat as the impossible reality sinks in, and before he can even formulate an escape plan, a swarm of skeletons dogpiles him, brutally crushing his limbs against the cold floor. They smash his face into the dirt, utterly paralyzing him and stripping away his last. As he struggles helplessly beneath the crushing weight, the horned skeletal boss slowly eclipses the light above him, looming like a mercenary. Yoshito curses his own arrogance, realizing he walked straight into a fatal snare. There is zero room to breathe, let alone. The monstrous leader casually struts forward, while its cronies keep Yoshito pinned down. But just as the death blow approaches, the boss's empty eye sockets snap, echoing from the far end of the dungeon. The grim spectacle is interrupted by two impossible arrivals, Yuri, who have miraculously survived the descent into the boss chamber. Without hesitating for a single second, Yuri rapidly chants, funneling every ounce of her mana into a massive, desperate. She unleashes a torrential shockwave of high-pressure water straight into the undead mob. The deafening blast completely blindsides the skeletal guards. The roaring tidal wave spirals into a devastating vortex, violently ripping through the chamber's center. Her ultimate strike just flipped the entire battle. But her triumphant smile shatters into pure dread the moment the magical mist clears. The sinister aura has not faded. Through the dripping aftermath, bone begins grinding against bone. Instead of crumbling to dust, the mangled undead slowly, mockingly drag themselves back to their feet. Her ultimate attack barely scratched them. Mana instantly dives into the fray, fiercely slicing down a stray monster to carve out some breathing room. But it is just a drop in the ocean. The horrifying truth drops on both girls at once. They are completely walled in by a sea of blood. Still crushed against the stone, Yoshito screams his lungs out, begging them to run before they are butchered. Seeing them in the crosshairs sends a spike of absolute terror straight into his heart, paralyzed by the agonizing reality that he cannot lift a finger to save them. The horned boss sneers down at his pathetic struggle with burning contempt, and in a blur of motion, a gruesome squelch rings out as the monster's blade cleanly a blinding flash of sheer agony practically shatters his sanity. He shrieks in raw torment as hot blood fountains across the floor, while the lesser undead brutally hold him in place. The warlord just stands there, chillingly silent, casually watching its victim thrash, and through the haze of unbearable pain, a terrifying realization freezes his blood. The boss is not going for a quick kill. It is a second merciless slash tears into his flesh, amplifying the torment and dragging his shattered mind to the very brink of The sheer savagery of the mutilation is so extreme that even the mindless skeletons seem to halt their advance. The Overlord simply bathes in his prey, its empty eyes devoid of a single ounce of mercy. Clinging to the last threads of life, Yoshito manages a desperate, broken plea for the carnage to end. But the nightmare is far from over. Instead of granting him the sweet release of death, the monster slowly raises its hands. Jagged, bony fingers loom over him, signaling an agonizing escalation of the one-sided slaughter. With a horrifying crunch, the boss mercilessly dragging out the execution into a sickening display of physical mutilation. A heavy, suffocating silence drops over the cavern, freezing the room as the gruesome, that dead quiet only amplifies the soul-crushing despair of the moment. Yoshito, his spark fading fast as his mangled body finally shuts down. His vision completely glazes over, leaving his mind trapped in the agonizing limbo between life and the void. A dark, guttural chuckle rumbles from the demonic leader, wildly entertained by the sight of its utterly broken plaything. The creature sadistically, the staff is about to become a monument of his deepest trauma, not his salvation. And with that, the cold system prompt chimes one last time, declaring his brutal death. Triumphant, the skeletal warlord stands tall over the horrific aftermath, completely oblivious to one massive secret. The fabric of reality warps and twists around him. Floating in the cold abyss of death, his consciousness sparks back to life. But the monster's gruesome face instantly hijacks his mind, cementing itself as an inescapable nightmare. He jolts awake, choking on a desperate gasp of sheer terror. The horrific trauma loops inside his head with such brutal clarity, it feels like his flesh is being shredded all over again. A grim system prompt flashes before his eyes, locking him in the eerie waiting room before resurrection. Yet even beyond the grave, the phantom sting of that fatal blow echoes through his gripping his trembling face. He fights to wrangle his ragged breaths, but the sickening image of his own mangled corpse refuses to fade. Cold sweat drips down his neck, as that suffocating sense of utter powerlessness balloons in the hollow, soulless eye sockets of the skeleton horde violently invade his thoughts, while the boss's menacing skull towers over his fracturing sanity. It becomes the absolute core of his dread. Shivering uncontrollably, he somehow commands his jelly-like legs to stand up inside the void. He desperately scrambles to piece his shattered focus back together before the anxiety swallows. A glowing, transparent alert violently shatters his thoughts. Revival is imminent, and the clock is ticking down. A sickening realization hits him. If he bails now, it is game over. But the crushing weight of his own defeat is not what scares him the most. It is the blood-curdling thought of Yuri and Mana being slaughtered in his absence. Jaw clenched, he vows to respawn right this second, butcher that boss, and drag his friends out alive before the timer hits. That burning resolve forges into one unbreakable mission: save the girls at any cost. He practically screams at himself to shove the cowardice deep down. Yet even as the brave words echo in his mind, the violent shaking of his hands betrays the bone-deep horror still paralyzing him. Why am I so damn scared, he agonizes, finally swallowing the bitter, humiliating pill that pure terror is still holding him hostage. The merciless interface locks in his fatality, ticking down the final seconds until the infinite revival protocol kicks in. Forcing his brain to work through the blind panic, he pulls a massive tactical audible and shifts his exact drop zone. The network accepts the override and thrusts him back into the waking world. He materializes straight inside the boss's lair, dropping himself right back into the absolute jaws of death. His eyes dart around frantically, searching for Yuri and Mana. The second his vocal cords work, he screams their names across the cavern. The giant monster instantly locks onto his fresh soul. Quivering like a leaf, he reaches out toward the bloodbath, desperately trying to jumpstart his frozen muscles. But the endless ocean of bone warriors barricades his path like an impenetrable fortress. A wave of intense self-loathing hits him. He actually calls, only to turn into a complete statue again. His limbs brutally reject every command, proving that the trauma is still driving the car. On the far side of the slaughterhouse, Yuri and Mana grip each other tightly, squeezing their eyes shut, as they watching them cower helplessly makes his blood boil with pure frustration. Meanwhile, the monster winds up for a devastating strike, hell-bent on wiping them all off the map. A massive, blood-red magic ring materializes, charging up an apocalyptic spell. The rune suddenly detonates into a hyper-concentrated beam of annihilating hellfire. He stands paralyzed, watching the cataclysmic explosion detonate behind him, completely swallowing the chamber. The sheer godlike scale of the blast leaves him absolutely speechless. But then a mysterious silhouette steps through the pulverized rubble of the doorway, casually resting a blazing broadsword on his shoulder. Smirking, the stranger casually mentions he heard the front gate was totally jam-locked, so he just blew the damn thing off its hinges. He chuckles, admitting he definitely did not expect to crash an active war zone. Yuri and Mana stare at this sudden savior, their eyes wide with a dizzying mix of utter shock. The giant beast and its undead army instantly pivot, snapping their focus toward this bold crasher. Our hero just stands there, jaw glued to the floor, struggling to compute the miraculous rescue. With one sweeping glance, the newcomer flawlessly calculates the entire battlefield. Unfazed, he coolly declares that things look incredibly messy, but totally salvageable. The skeleton horde swarms him instantly, aiming to slice him to ribbons. Without breaking a sweat, he swings his colossal blade, swatting the undead creeps away like annoying flies. He casually tosses a glance at our paralyzed hero, and promises to lend a hand. The kid is too mind-blown to do anything but listen. Brimming with absolute swagger, the warrior introduces himself as the Dominator King Kagura Okuyomi. He boldly swears that under his watch, nobody is dropping dead today. Just hearing that legendary title sends a massive shockwave through the boy's system. His brain short-circuits. Dominator King is a mythical god-tier rank, awarded exclusively to absolute monsters, who have brutally conquered the Great Magic Tower, past the 100th, and only a tiny elite fraction of players in all of Japan hold that godlike status. Cutting off any further fangirling, Okuyomi hits pause and confidently smirks, declaring it is time to establish absolute dominance over this pathetic dungeon. Searing crimson flames violently erupt from his body, creating a devastating shockwave across. The strike explodes into a magnificent raging inferno dubbed Elenhos, completely burying the entire cavern in a sea of. Entire waves of bone soldiers are instantly vaporized, crumbling to ash inside the roaring blaze. Watching the sheer destruction, our hero can only mutter in absolute awe as the momentum violently flips in a split second. Even the towering boss is shoved backward, entirely overwhelmed by the catastrophic. Realizing it is completely outmatched, the cowardly monster tries to slither away through the blinding smoke, but Okuyomi catches the pathetic retreat, treating it like a slightly annoying chore. Refusing to let his prey slip away, he charges through the inferno to brutally execute the beast himself. The monstrous boss erupts, projecting a massive defensive shield to desperately halt his relentless charge. Okuyomi doesn't even flinch, answering the move by unleashing a devastating. His blazing blade slams into the shield, triggering an explosive shockwave of roaring fire and crackling blue energy. The sheer kinetic force instantly splinters the monster's defenses, completely shattering its arrogant composure. Unable to withstand the colossal pressure, the magical barricade shatters into a million shimmering fragments. The resulting blast hurls hurricane-force winds and jagged, yet standing right in the eye of the magical storm, Okuyomi remains perfectly composed. Complete without missing a single beat, he lunges forward, grabbing the towering beast and utterly dominating it in brutal, point-blank combat. The crushing blow rocks the creature to its core, leaving it completely. Okuyomi mercilessly drives the monstrosity downward, aggressively pressing the attack. The colossal beast violently slams into the cold stone floor. With just a single calculating glance, Okuyomi knows this brutal deathmatch is officially over. With absolute victory practically secured, his intense demeanor instantly softens. Turning his full attention toward our young hero, he snaps the kid out of his shocked daze. He then firmly insists that the final, glorious kill belongs strictly to the young warrior. The unexpected proposition completely blindsides the fledgling fighter. Okuyomi gazes at him, clearly recognizing the deep, haunting trauma permanently etched into the boy's terrified expression. He wisely warns the kid against carrying those dark nightmares forever, urging him to brutally sever those chains right here with his own two hands. Those heavy words strike a profound chord. Slowly grasping the offered blade, with burning resolve, he genuinely thanks his savior. Meanwhile, the mangled beast twitches pathetically on the bloody ground, desperately clinging to life. But right before the kid can swing the dying monstrosity, viciously lunges forward, launching one final suicide. Our hero instantly retaliates, unleashing a perfectly executed, lethal swing. As the beast is brutally sliced apart, it bitterly curses how Okiyomi's unexpected interference. The suffocating dread finally evaporates from his soul, completely reigniting his fierce, warrior spirit. Watching closely from the sidelines, Okiyomi flashes a silent, proud smile. He instantly recognizes that the trembling kid has permanently shattered his crippling inner demon. With crystal clarity, our hero confidently declares his absolute satisfaction. Smiling, Okiyomi gently rests a heavy, reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, gearing up to officially declare the thrilling results of this bloody crusade. He proudly crowns the kid as the absolute, undisputed conqueror of the Persephone Tower. The young warrior aggressively shakes his head, flat out refusing to steal the spotlight. He fiercely argues that he literally only sneaked in the final kill, and that this monumental triumph was absolutely a collaborative team. But Kagura instantly shuts that nonsense down. He firmly establishes that Yoshito and literally nobody else is the legitimate slayer of the Hermes Tower boss. He passionately explains that no matter how messy the bloody brawl got, the epic loot universally belongs to the warrior who secured the ultimate win. Right on cue, the glowing system interface validates his claim, strictly awarding the ultra-rare weapon. Kagura fiercely doubles down aggressively, urging Yoshito to boldly claim his rightful treasures, without a single ounce of hesitation. Even as Yoshito stubbornly pushes back, the older veteran completely rejects any ridiculous. A massive wave of pure bewilderment washes over Yoshito's face, while his mentor casually justifies his shockingly Rather than hoarding the priceless artifacts, Kagura generously orders the rookie squad to utilize every single piece to aggressively level up. His incredibly chill vibe proves this generous decision is already set in stone. Plus, he casually flexes that he's basically swimming in cash anyway. Already wielding a beautifully mastered blade of his own, he finds immense joy in happily passing these legendary rewards down to the rising generation. The sheer, unadulterated kindness leaves Yoshito and the girls standing there completely speechless and deeply touched by the massive flex of generosity. Breaking the heavy emotional silence, Kagura playfully demands a quick sneak peek at whatever insane god-tier weapon the system just coughed up. Burning with sheer curiosity over the shiny new loot, he leans in eagerly, prompting a highly swallowing hard, Yoshito nervously, intensely dreading a wildly embarrassing reveal. And predictably, the legendary drop manifests as an ultra-rare relic, officially dubbed the Arcana Aqua. But here's the hilarious kicker. Tapping his holographic inventory, he tragically spawns the item. A blinding flash of radiant light erupts instantly, revealing the elegant magical rod to the entire. Staring at the ornate design, a painful wave of realization heavily washes over his face. He loudly confirms its majestic title, Arcana Aqua. Kagura doesn't miss a single beat, hilariously pointing out the massive elephant in the room. Totally defeated, our boy straight up confesses that his magical talent is literally non-existent. Knowing this legendary gear is completely useless in his hands, his brain immediately scrambles for a much better candidate. Pivoting fast, he casually shoves the glowing artifact toward Yuri, highly suggesting the girl take it for a The unexpected handoff completely startles the poor girl. Hearing her name drop so casually, gazing softly at the ground, Yuri whispers that she is completely unworthy of wielding such a rare top-tier weapon. Yoshito opens his mouth to object, but her crushing guilt. Mana steps in her voice tight, as she confesses they had already discussed this and realized they were just dead weight in combat. Yuri twists the knife deeper into her own pride, admitting this failure was not just a one-time thing. They botched the last raid too. Tears welling in her eyes, she tearfully confesses that they have been acting like in her mind, teaming up was a massive, unforgivable mistake from day one. Hearing this, Yoshito desperately cuts her off, loudly arguing that he was completely useless in this fight as well. He points out that if Kagura had not swooped in, they would all be dead. He fiercely reminds them that they were acting as his human shields, not the other way around. Mana's rigid posture relaxes, deeply touched by his fierce refusal to blame them. However, she looks him dead in the eye and asks if he truly realizes the heavy weight of his own words. Her tone softens as she calls him out, pointing out that by only focusing on who shielded who, he is still treating them like fragile glass to protect, rather than equal partners on the battlefield. The realization hits Yoshito like a truck. His desperate comfort just inflicted a brand new wound. An invisible canyon suddenly splits the room, as the girls physically step back from him. Scrambling, Yoshito searches frantically for the right words to bridge the gap. But before he can utter a single syllable, the duo drops a bombshell. They are going to grind and power up alone. Their sudden, fierce resolve leaves him. Dropping her gaze, Yuri declares that they are going to tackle Persephone's massive tower, completely solo. Mana quickly jumps in, swearing that once they level up as fast as humanly possible, they will return. Standing united, they promise this painful goodbye is strictly temporary, and that they will absolutely find their way back to his side. With a gentle final sigh, Yuri insists that until that day comes, he needs to hold on to the weapon. Shoving the Arcana Aqua right back into his chest, she refuses to take it. Gripping the staff, her trembling hands betray her nerves, but utterly dumbfounded, Yoshito tries to refuse. But Yuri passionately argues that this is exactly why he needs it. She tells him that if he truly craves ultimate power, he has to violently exploit every single advantage he can grab. That raw, unfiltered declaration leaves the boy completely speechless. Just as the heavy silence settles, glowing blue system alerts aggressively flood his vision. The dungeon system officially declares Persephone's, triggering an immediate forced teleportation sequence. As the crumbling tower is swallowed by blinding golden transfer magic, Yoshito can only watch helplessly as the girls fade into thin air. Blinking, he suddenly finds himself standing back from the sidelines. Kagura chuckles, noting how incredibly grown-up and dramatic that little parting was. Yoshito furiously scoffs, muttering that it was anything but a clean break. Smirking, Kagura confesses that seeing the girls march off actually left him feeling a tiny bit empty. Dropping his casual front, he mentions he caught Yoshito's name during the chaotic brawl. Noticing the kid has a wide-open schedule, Kagura suddenly throws out an invitation to hang out and kill some time. He drops the offer without an ounce of arrogance, treating Yoshito. Flashing a breezy, confident grin, the veteran extends the offer once more. Suspicious but entirely curious, Yoshito cautiously asks what the high-tier hunter actually wants from him. Kagura casually drops a massive name to the absolute head honcho of the Tokyo Metropolitan Management Bureau, called him in for a chat. Since his usual turf is straight down in the central district, getting dragged all the way out here screams major trouble. He sighs heavily, bluntly stating this whole meeting is guaranteed to be a massive headache. Diving into the Persephone dungeon was literally just a way to kill time before the nightmare meeting, making their encounter pure coincidence. But that random crossover perfectly connected the dots on who the kid was. Yoshito's brain shorts out. Why would a powerhouse like Kagura give a damn about him? He frantically thinks back, realizing his overpowered infinite revival skill stayed completely hidden the entire time, meaning he should look like an average nobody. Kagura chuckles, revealing his deep curiosity actually stems from wild rumors on the grapevine. Apparently, Fiend has been intensely hyping the kid up, literally dubbing him the rising dominator of the upcoming generation. That insanely heavy title hits the boy like a brick wall. His jaw basically drops in shock. Stuttering, he asks if the chief actually said that, and Kagura shoots back a The veteran laughs, admitting the massive hype caught him wildly off. He totally pegged Yoshito as just some random everyday teenager. Desperate, the boy latches straight onto that exact excuse, furiously swearing up and down that he is utterly powerless against these nightmare bosses. Kagura just waves off the rising panic, casually telling him to simply grind harder next time. Glancing at the clock, he notices a gap before his dreaded appointment, so with a mischievous smirk, Kagura decides to drag the bewildered kid along for a while before the boy can sneak off to catch his breath. Kagura yanks Yoshito right back into the spotlight. The powerhouse pitches a wild detour, a massive shopping spree. Flexing his status as a Dominator King drowning in surplus loot, he spins the whole trip as a masterclass in blowing cash like a true high roller. The prospect of soaking up financial wisdom from Japan's wealthiest elite instantly lights up Yoshito's eye. And Kagura, he is practically buzzing with excitement to flex his extravagant lifestyle. This insane spending spree eventually drags them straight to the Management Bureau headquarters. By the time they hit the lobby, Yoshito is dripping and the styling is so aggressively over the top that every single stitch screams pure, unadulterated wealth. Kagura beams with pride at his masterpiece, while the poor kid looks like a hostage trapped inside a luxury boutique. Escorted into the chief's office, Fion takes one deadpan look at the duo and dryly asks who these absolute clowns are. Flustered, Yoshito snaps back that she obviously knows exactly who they are. Fion shoots back that recognizing them is not the issue. It is the absolutely ridiculous outfit Kagura forced on him. Kagura brushes off the jab, treating it like a golden teaching moment for his protege. He preaches that hoarding a Dominator King's wealth means absolutely nothing if you lack the drip to pull it off. Smashing his hands on the desk, Yoshito violently rejects this. Spinning the crosshairs, he points a finger right back at Fion, accusing her of having zero fashion sense herself. He pushes his luck, visualizing aloud that she probably rots on the couch in baggy, stained sweatpants all weekend. A terrifying, icy silence fills the room. He definitely hit way too close to home. Without uttering a single syllable, she reaches into her drawer and whips out the screen flashes an image proving she absolutely crushes high-end fashion, radiating pure elegance when she actually tries. Even crazier, the data shows her personal aesthetic is currently dominating the top trend charts, voted as the #1 style by elite management executives across. Realizing he just roasted the absolute worst target, Yoshito instantly hits the floor in a desperate groveling apology. Kagura howls with laughter at the kid's total humiliation. Dropping the jokes, he demands to know why Fion dragged him all the way down here. Her gaze sharpens. She declares there is only one valid reason to summon a powerhouse of his terrifying caliber. The Tokyo Metropolitan Challengers Management Bureau is gearing up to launch a massive, full-scale military operation. Operation Yoshito, mutters the word, a cold sweat breaking out as he senses the sheer magnitude of the incoming chaos. Fion locks eyes with them, confirming this is not some rookie fetch quest. Their target is the absolute conquest of the great magic tower Zeus, the most heavily corrupted, magic-infested death trap in all of Kanto. Kagura instantly her tone darkens as she explains that challengers nationwide are pushing into higher floors, and the body count is skyrocketing. The Bureau simply cannot afford to turn a blind eye to this catastrophic loss of life. However, she leaks a crucial secret: the upper stratosphere of Zeus is still overflowing with astronomical, untapped resources. Every single drop of that legendary loot will be split among the brave volunteers who join the raid, transforming the mission into a lethal, high-stakes gamble with a jaw-dropping payout. The recruited hunters will be strategically scattered across the entire colossal structure, slotted everywhere from the bloody frontline vanguard to the rear support squads based purely on their combat stats. But make no mistake, Fion grimly warns that Zeus is on a totally different level of lethality compared to standard dungeons. She fully expects a brutal slaughter, even with the elite bureau directly commanding the charge. To minimize the inevitable bloodbath, she desperately needs Kagura. She throws his legendary conquest of the great magic tower, Hephaestus, back at him, proving he is the only weapon capable of surviving this meat grinder. Called out by name, the Dominator King absorbs the heavy burden of his own terrifying reputation. He does not even try to negotiate. If lending his overwhelming power saves lives, he is ready to unleash absolute hell. With a single nod, his fate is sealed. Meanwhile, standing completely frozen beside him, Yoshito realizes he just stumbled into. Kagura throws a massive curveball, stating he only has one non-negotiable demand before he signs off on this. He wants Yoshito dragged right to the bloody front lines with him, and Fran doesn't even blink, green-lighting the insane idea on the spot. Meanwhile, Yoshito's blood runs cold as he realizes he's just been drafted into a suicide mission without flashing a terrifyingly bright smile. Kagura claps him on the back, declaring he's looking forward to their brand new partnership. A cold sweat breaks out across Yoshito's face. Pure dread, his silent screaming panic practically rattles the walls of the entire facility. The narrative quickly pivots, setting its sights on the looming structure of Protus, pinpointed as their next prime target. Snapping back to the present moment, Kagura and an extremely reluctant Yoshito stand side by side, geared up and ready to hit the road. Kagura casually floats the idea of. Fran chimes in, laying out the logistics. The massive-scale preparations for Operation Zeus are still cooking. Until the green light flashes, the duo has total freedom to burn through their downtime however they see fit. Wasting 0 seconds, Kagura asks her to drop a pin on a local brutal tower, the perfect crucible to forge Yoshito into a weapon. He lays all his cards on the table. Before dragging the poor guy, he intends to push Yoshito's physical limits and beef up his stats. Trembling slightly, Yoshito nervously points out the glaring fact that the word no was never actually an option on the menu. Without missing a beat, Kagura cheerfully agrees with him. Still utterly baffled, Yoshito desperately demands to know why this absolute powerhouse is so obsessed with bringing him along. Kagura's playful vibe drops for a second. He flatly states he just wants to see Yoshito unlock his hidden fire. In his calculating gaze, literally no one else on the roster fits the bill. Yoshito just stands there, totally bewildered by this terrifying blind faith. Fran slices through the awkward tension, dropping hard intel on the absolute best spot for a hellish boot camp. She pulls up the data on the ominously named Magic Spire. Sure, from the outside it looks like a totally generic run-of-the-mill, but the shadows inside are absolutely crawling with lethal. Better yet, scouts recently uncovered a massive, untapped vein of premium magic stones deep within its. It is an absolute gold mine for greedy adventurers, and the ultimate playground for rapid leveling. Cut to shortly after Kagura hauls his new victim into a grueling, isolated arena, literally tossing him straight into the crosshairs of a massive, heavily armored mechanical juggernaut. Standing safely on the sidelines, he yells out that he needs to see where, and tosses out a mocking question, daring the rookie to survive the slaughter entirely solo. Gritting his teeth, Yoshito forcefully swallows his fear. There is nowhere left to run. Gripping the hilt of his weapon, he steps, resolving to bite the bullet and clash with this towering metal monstrosity face to face. Pushing his own boundaries, Yoshito violently kicks, but the giant Iron Knight explodes with terrifying velocity, a hyper-fast reaction that leaves Yoshito totally shell-shocked. His brain scrambles to process the erratic, freakishly swift movements of the mechanical beast. Still, sheer adrenaline takes over. He scores a brutal, sparkling slash across its chassis, forcing the steel giant to stagger backwards. But the machine unleashing a heavy counterattack that forces Yoshito into a desperate, refusing to back down, he furiously closes the gap. The metal guardian ducks into a low crouch. The monstrous enemy hoists its massive weapon skyward, telegraphing a skull-crushing overhead execution. Yoshito instantly braces his legs to absorb the incoming shockwave. Locking his eyes onto the blur of steel, his instincts scream that the trajectory is totally off. He instantly sniffs out the mechanical glitch in its form, ruthlessly punishing. The kinetic impact absolutely rocks the colossal knight, sending its massive metallic frame stumbling. A spark of arrogant hope ignites in Yoshito's chest. He actually thinks he has downloaded the boss's attack pattern up on the ridge. Kagura twitches, but deliberately holds back. Cold-heartedly, the sudden shift in the air triggers Yoshito's danger sense, but he realizes his fatal error. The Iron Titan violently chucks its massive sword like a lethal missile, flipping the entire dynamic of the fight upside down. Watching the slaughter, Kagura quietly admits, but he cruelly holds his ground. He needs absolute, undeniable proof of what this kid is truly made of. He frames this horrific beatdown as a brutal stress test to gauge Yoshito's actual specs before they dive into the abyss together. Whispering a hollow apology, he watches as the flying blade brutally impales Yoshito, that he is intentionally torturing the one man in existence who can never, ever. From his safe little perch, Kagura watches the sheer kinetic force of the blast violently launch Yoshito through the air like a broken rag doll. He slams into the harsh dirt, the monstrous weapon, still horribly pinned directly through his chest. A thick, dark pool of crimson quickly spreads beneath him. The metallic shadow of the knight looms over him, closing the distance to deliver the brutal final blow. But through the mind-numbing, excruciating agony, Yoshito defies death. Boiling with rage, he screams curses at the monster, absolutely refusing to stay buried. Watching from the shadows, the mysterious onlooker finally connects the dots, recognizing this unnatural phenomenon as the legendary. It's true, Yoshito is literally unkillable. This absolute proof seals the deal, convincing the observer that this immortal kid is the only soul worthy enough to fight by his side. Meanwhile, Yoshito flashes a cocky grin, mercilessly mocking the armored knight for fighting barehanded and having zero chance of pulling off a victory. But the smack talk ends abruptly. The hulking brute unleashes a hidden trump card, and a pitch-black spike explodes right through Yoshito's chest, violently silencing his arrogant boast. Once again the lights go out, and he drops dead. The cold system interface immediately, but his broken passive ability violently flips the script. Instead of suffering a loss, the penalty shatters, converting into a massive permanent power boost. Ripping himself back from the grave, Yoshito spits blood and growls about getting his heart punctured twice in one day. Without skipping a single beat, he rockets straight back into the meat grinder. This time he fiercely collides with the corrupted blade head-on. Fueled by pure, unadulterated rage, he screams out a vow to complete. He unleashes a relentless barrage of point-blank strikes, desperately trying to crush the monstrosity's defenses, but the Titan counters beautifully. It detonates a hurricane of razor-sharp energy blades, completely flooding the cavern with lethal Gritting his teeth, Yoshito realizes he just can't land a clean kill shot. And worse, an ominous crimson glow suddenly flares up from the pitch-black depths of the cave. Before he can even catch his breath, a massive shockwave sends him flying like a rag doll. He skids violently across the dirt, only to watch a second. Reality crashes down on him. This nightmare is rapidly spiraling out of control, as an entire squad of these juggernauts stomps into the arena. To make matters worse, a brutal shower of magical artillery starts. The monstrous squad ruthlessly closes the jaws of their trap, bombarding the ground all around him, and utterly. Two heavily armored behemoths charge in from opposite directions, raising their massive weapons to crush this pesky human into paste. Staring death in the face yet again, watching from above, the mysterious swordsman scoffs at the brutal beasts for mercilessly jumping a rookie. Down below, Yoshito he barely holds the front line against the dual assault. But one hulking brute smashes heavily into his trembling guard, violently forcing him down to his knees. Biting back the pain, he rips his blade upward in a desperate, sweeping arc, managing to shove both towering freaks back for just a split second. But it's totally useless. Lethal. Panting heavily, Yoshito finally admits that this brawl has officially turned. He knows the brutal truth: if this chaotic mess drags on, having infinite lives won't stop him from being permanently pinned down and tortured. Swallowing his fear, he braces himself for another gruesome ending. But right at that moment, his shadowy companion decides the show is over. Calling off his little field test, the overpowered swordsman finally drops directly into the chaotic fray. With one casual, lightning-fast swing of his blade, he effortlessly cleaves right through both armored titans. The unstoppable enemies instantly. While Yoshito is still blinking in utter disbelief, the powerhouse casually claps for the kid's gutsy performance, grinning as he declares that the real main event is about to start. Pumping himself up, he proudly boasts that he is finally going to demonstrate what true terrifying power actually. In a flash, his weapon erupts into a blinding, raging inferno. Massive pillars of fire blast toward the ceiling, instantly vaporizing every single remaining monster. Yoshito's jaw hits the floor as he witnesses this apocalyptic level of destruction. Meanwhile, the flashy swordsman strikes a dramatic pose, completely soaking in the. Smirking confidently, he turns back to the stunned rookie, eagerly fishing for some massive, mind-blown applause. Scratching his head, he chuckles and admits he originally wanted to drag out a super flashy combo, but the trash mobs just turned to ash way too fast. Still, he figures his However, instead of cheering, Yoshito is just staring intensely with a dead. The overpowered hero suddenly sweats, realizing this one-shot wipeout totally missed the mark. What he actually wanted was to showcase his burning warrior spirit by fighting tooth and nail against impossible odds, exactly like the kid did. He frantically argues that his struggle was totally genuine, even if vaporizing an entire army in 3 seconds. Suddenly, right in the middle of a dungeon, these two fierce warriors start a. Eventually, the flashy swordsman just waves away the argument, laughing that there will be plenty of other epic boss fights for him to truly style on. Shaking his head, Yoshito asks for the next game plan. His new partner reveals a juicy tip from Fion. There is a massive, untouched magic crystal quarry just up ahead. He breaks down the lore, explaining that these rare stones are basically chunks of pure, condensed magical energy, and they act like giant Even worse, some gluttonous creatures actively gorge themselves on the raw crystals, mutating into terrifyingly overpowered, high-level variant. Because of this insane power buff, the absolute deadly. The veteran gives a serious look, making sure the rookie truly grasps the lethal danger awaiting them. But instead of backing down, he loudly declares that they need to hunt down those mutated freaks and farm them for massive loot. The swordsman bursts into laughter. Pushing forward, the duo soon steps into a sprawling underground chamber, beautifully illuminated. Inside the massive quarry, a crew of grimy, exhausted scavengers is already frantically hacking away at the glowing walls, while their battered teammates try to catch their breath in the dirt. One heavily bruised worker completely. Deeper inside the cavern, a crew of female miners kicks back, swapping stories and laughing during a quick breather. Just behind them, a massive, crystal-studded boulder looms in dead, unnatural sight. Suddenly, glowing crimson eyes snap open from within the jagged stone. A monster. Yoshito barely has a single second to process the terrifying sight. He and his sword-wielding buddies survey the sheer scale of the 25th floor's mining zone, completely floored by the endless veins of glittering magic stones. The swordsman nudges him, asking if this is his very first time hitting a mining zone. Yoshito nods. They definitely had not stumbled across anything like this massive cavern in the upper level. The glittering gems instantly trigger a memory of his last massive payday at the Magic Stone Exchange. His imagination runs wild, picturing this entire cavern melting down into a colossal mountain of cold hard cash. Pure unfiltered greed washes over him. A haul like this would make him filthy rich. He almost drops everything to grab a pickaxe right then and there. But the swordsman pops that fantasy bubble before Yoshito can completely embarrass himself. He points out a glaring flaw. If hauling these rocks was actually a gold mine, way more explorers would be down here digging. The illusion shatters as Yoshito realizes there has to be a catch. The swordsman breaks it down. When magic stones cluster together in extremely tight packs, their individual power drastically plummets. Instead of absorbing raw mana, the forming gems end up aggressively fighting each other for the area's limited energy. The end result: a massive pile of low-grade junk, totally riddled with nasty impurities. You could mine a whole cartload and barely scrape by at the market. Yet against all odds, crews still come down here to dig. The Management Bureau keeps the tunnels locked down, stationing seasoned explorers around the perimeter for heavy-duty protection. For these miners, a safe, steady paycheck completely beats risking their necks in combat, keeping the demand for this grueling work alive. Over in the corner, the mining ladies cheerfully show off their glittering finds to one another. Watching their warm, tight-knit bond tugs at Yoshito's heartstrings. The lively chatter instantly pulls his mind back to his own old crew, Yuri, Mana. Suddenly the crushing weight of their absence hits him, leaving an unexpected hollow ache in his chest. But before he can completely drown in his own sadness, his buddy loudly snaps him right back to reality. The swordsman violently slings an arm around Yoshito's shoulders, flashing a wicked, teasing grin. Catching the direction of his gaze, the guy pokes fun, asking if our hero is drooling over one of the mining girls. He relentlessly needles him, demanding to know exactly which one caught his eye. Yoshito angrily shoves him off, swearing he isn't looking at anyone. Flipping the script, the swordsman presses even harder. He demands to know who Yoshito actually likes back home. The sudden mention of Yuri makes Yoshito's pulse spike. It hits way too close to home. The swordsman quickly narrows the suspect list down to the two beauties who hung around. Both were absolute knockouts, he admits. He pictures the fierce, fiery blonde first, weighing the odds. Next, his mind jumps to the quiet, blue-haired girl spinning wild theories. He even tosses Fran into the chaotic mix for good measure. Having way too much fun with this interrogation, he blatantly demands to know if Yoshito is secretly harboring feelings for any of them. Meanwhile, miles away, a totally distracted Yuri takes a harsh scolding for spacing out mid-battle. Yoshito finally snaps, calling the entire conversation complete garbage. He harshly reminds his friend that they marched down here to train, not to gossip like high schoolers. Instead of answering, the swordsman suddenly points right past his shoulder. He laughingly calls Yoshito a massive tsundere and tells him to shut his mouth. The banter dies instantly. In that exact moment, the mining crew ventures further into the shadows and uncovers an absolute behemoth of a crystal formation. Completely mesmerized by the sheer size of the jackpot, one miner greedily winds up her pickaxe and swings hard. A blinding metallic spark erupts on impact. But the crystal refuses to. Rubbing her numbed hands, she stares in absolute shock at the freakishly dense stone. "Why is this one so tough?" she mutters. Her question gets answered immediately. A colossal crystal golem slowly opens its glowing eyes right behind her. The swordsman's blood runs cold. He instantly realizes the lethal danger. The gigantic rocky shell pulls itself out from the earth, towering over the terrified crew. The women completely freeze as the entire cavern violently quakes. The golem violently charges the defenseless miners. Its mountain-like body barrels straight for them, and the guards are way too far out to intercept the brutal strike. The beast heaves its massive, jagged arm into the air, winding up for a devastating, killing blow. Sharp crystals lining its massive frame start to glow ominously, vibrating. Channeling a massive surge of energy, the monster unleashes a deadly, high-speed volley of razor-sharp crystal shrapnel. The lethal barrage rips through the air, perfectly trapping the screaming women in the kill zone. Huddling together, they squeeze their eyes shut and brace for a gruesome end. The monstrous golem presses the brutal assault, showing absolutely zero. In a blur of motion, Yoshito rockets out in front, placing himself squarely between the women. A deadly storm of glass shards hurtles toward them, but he counters with a blinding crimson whirlwind of slanting. Keeping his eyes locked fiercely on the threat, he absorbs the brunt of the onslaught. "You guys okay?" he barks over his shoulder, urging them to bolt before it is too late. Rooted to the spot, the girls gawk at their savior, utterly paralyzed by shock and awe. Snapping back to reality, they scramble frantically. Meanwhile, Yoshido winces inwardly, secretly praying his heroic stunt looked half as badass as he intended. His reckless gamble pays off, but with a horrific twist. The crystalline beast unleashes a savage counterstrike, ripping straight through his flesh and launching him through the air like a rag doll. Hitting the ground in a pool of his own blood, he embraces his grim fate, comforted by the thought that staring into the eyes of his monstrous executioner, a bittersweet longing washes over him. The desperate desire to have been someone truly great. His mind drifts to Okiyomi, the absolute powerhouse he always idolized for rescuing the weak with effortless swagger. Even as the darkness closes in, that burning ideal remains his ultimate truth. Walking in Okiyomi's footsteps was everything to him. Originally, his ambition was simple. He wanted to conquer the magic towers, claw his way out of the slums and never look back. But once he secured the bag, he hit a wall of hollow emptiness. Beyond mere survival and wealth, his life lacked a pulse, a true driving force. Everything shifted during the chaos at Persephone. Watching Okiyomi step up to shield the innocent ignited a fiery new benchmark in his soul. The fog cleared. He finally knew his purpose: to evolve into a trailblazer who pulls people from the brink of despair. It was this very conviction that fueled his suicidal dive into the beast's lethal barrage. To his last breath, he yearns to be that fearless protector. A cold mechanical chime rings out. The system confirms his death. A brutal penalty flashes a permanent drop in his intelligence stat. But then, the ultimate cheat code activates. His innate reversal skill kicks, twisting that crushing loss into a permanent massive boost to his intellect. Jolting back from the grave with a sharp, Yoshito immediately sizes up his current strength, comparing it to the towering legend he swore to become. The verdict is clear. He is still painfully short on raw technique and battle scars. Gritting his teeth, he vows to forge himself in blood and agony, whatever it takes. Sprinting straight back at the crystal monstrosity, he screams at it to dance with him till one of them drops. It sounds like pure arrogance, but it is a blood oath to wage absolute war without a single step back. He crashes into the creature's armored hide, pouring every ounce of his soul in. The deafening clash delivers a brutal reality check. The monster's shell is practically indestructible. Brute force is not going to leave a scratch. Panting and bewildered, he whips his head around. Where the hell did Okiyomi vanish to? Miles away from the slaughter, Okiyomi is coolly steering the terrified crowd toward the safe zone, masterfully orchestrating the escape. Noticing his escorts flinching in fear, he sharply reminds them that turning tail is not an option. Confronting nightmares like this is a burden they signed up for. However, he drops a massive bombshell. He has already dumped the frontline brawl onto his right-hand man Yoshito. Back in the fray, Yoshito is reeling from the sheer crushing weight of his mentor's blind trust. But there is no time to think. The beast unleashes a fresh avalanche of destruction. Snapping into action, Yoshito swings wildly in sheer frustration, yet his blade keeps bouncing harmlessly off the glittering armor. He weaves and slashes furiously, desperate to carve out even the tiniest weak point. Suddenly, a familiar commanding voice echoes across the It is Okiyomi. But instead of throwing him a lifeline, he cryptically asks if Yoshito's intelligence stat is high enough to grasp what is really happening. Yoshito glares, utterly pissed that he is getting roasted while fighting for his life. But Okiyomi quickly clarifies. He isn't calling him stupid, he means the actual numerical stat, not just basic common sense. He instructs the bruised fighter to leverage that boosted brain power and scrutinize his towering foe. If he looks closely enough, the hidden mechanism behind that impenetrable armor will expose itself. With that cryptic hint dropped, Okiyomi turns his back on the fight, leaving his protege to finish the job. With cursing under his breath at the half-baked advice, Yoshito forces himself to focus. It clicks. The intelligence attribute is the ultimate key to deciphering and commanding raw, mystical energy. A massive spike in this stat grants a player absolute mastery over arcane forces. The realization hits him like a freight train. His endless loop of dying has skyrocketed his intelligence, pushing it past the critical breaking point, even if he could not hurl fireballs just yet. Right on cue, a glowing system prompt shatters his vision. Two game-changing skills drop into his arsenal: magic sensing and magic. With perception, the invisible currents of mana flooding the battlefield suddenly burst into vibrant color. And with manipulation, he can finally weaponize and siphon the raw mana bleeding into the air. The unexpected notification leaves him stunned, yet it instantly clears the fog of defeat. A brutal but viable strategy snaps into focus. Tying this to his previous gruesome demise, a grim realization hits him. His absolute agony literally forged him into a stronger weapon. Embracing this twisted trade-off, he vows to weaponize his own death. Without wasting a single breath, he sparks up his brand new magic sensing. The world shifts through this fresh lens, revealing a dense, shimmering aura of mana suffocating the beast. The vision flickers wildly. Gritting his teeth, he forces his mind to lock onto the turbulent energy until the grim reality materializes. An invisible armor of condensed mana completely encases the creature. Suddenly, its absurd, unbreakable hide makes terrifying sense. With the phantom armor finally exposed, he sharpens his gaze. Out of the corner of his eye, he catches wisps of raw energy bleeding out of the cavern's scattered crystals, drifting straight into the glowing rocks littering the cave aren't just scenery. They are actively supercharging. A cold spike of dread hits him. If he lets it keep drinking up that mana, he is absolutely a dead man. But before he can even twitch, the beast erupts. A direct hit violently ragdolls him into jagged stone. Coughing up dust, he curses bitterly. Spotting the armor means completely nothing if his blade still bounces off it. Right as despair creeps in, a tiny glitch catches his eye. The monster's barrier actively warps and stutters under the crushing weight of the ambient mana. That split-second flicker is exactly the golden opening he desperately needed. He explodes off the cavern floor, lunging at the behemoth to rip into that flaw before the shield can harden back up. His strategy is brutally straightforward. Peel back the armor, then carve out its heart. He pours every ounce of his adrenaline into delivering pure, unadulterated. His sword violently collides with the barrier, sending violent shockwaves rippling across its glowing surface. Seeing that tremor confirms his theory flooding the shield with foreign mana will temporarily shatter its structural and following that logic, a massive, overwhelming tidal wave of energy should completely obliterate the armor. He backflips out of the danger zone, buying himself a crucial handful of seconds. To sever the beast's umbilical cord, he has to absolutely demolish every glowing crystal fueling it. As long as those rocks exist, the abomination remains invincible. Sensing his intent, the creature screeches, firing off another blinding barrage to lock him down. Scorching rays of light crater the bedrock around his boots, desperately trying to cage him in a prison of He responds with a ferocious hurricane of crimson slashes, cleaving straight through the cave's architecture and slicing the clustered ores to dust. The second the crystals detonate, the invisible currents of mana violently shift. He dances through the lethal crossfire, his blade pulverizing every mana deposit in sight, while narrowly sides brilliant crimson arcs paint the cavern walls as he ruthlessly amputates the monster's lifeline, stone by stone. The massive crystal bed finally erupts into a storm of glowing shrapnel. His stage is set, and he exhales sharply, grounding his stance for the leap. He acts like a black hole, violently sucking the liberated mana into his orbit. Recognizing the threat, the monstrosity hurls itself forward to snap his neck. It crashes down with seismic force, whipping up razor-sharp gales to shred him into pieces right on the spot. Yoshito fully ignites his magic manipulation. Instantly, the swirling dust of ambient energy bends to his absolute will, swarming his body. Within seconds, the entire cavern is choked with highly volatile mana, fully locked under his command. He grimly reminds himself that this skill doesn't pull energy out of thin air. It only hijacks what's already bleeding into the environment. This hard limit means he still cannot cast spells freely, but he can definitely funnel the suffocating ambient energy exactly where he needs it. And to crack this damned armor, that is more than enough. He forces all that roaring power straight into his blade, priming a deadly execution. His legs coil, and he blasts forward like a fired missile. His supercharged slash slams into the barrier with a deafening shockwave. Yet against all odds, the absolute juggernaut of a shield merely splinters instead of completely shattering.